High above the clouds, upon a majestic flying castle crafted from darkened stone and ethereal magic, two figures engaged in a fierce battle. One was a man donned in silver armor, wielding a radiant blade in his right hand. The second figure, in stark contrast, was dressed in a pitch-black suit of metallic armor. The atmosphere pulsated with tension as the two formidable beings locked eyes and disappeared just before colliding and unleashing a spectacular clash of magical energy. Gripping his enchanted sword tightly, the man in gleaming silver armor faced his opponent with unshaken determination. His piercing blue eyes locked onto the fiery gaze of the adversary, whose twisted, horned visage exuded pure malevolence. As the confrontation intensified, the ominous figure's obsidian wings unfurled, casting a foreboding shadow over the battlements of the soaring fortress. A thunderous roar echoed through the air as the clash between the two warriors unfolded, forcing both men to momentarily retreat. Strangely, they seemed to have sustained a comparable amount of damage. One left behind trails of radiant energy, a testament to the holy power coursing through his enchanted blade, while the other exuded fumes of shadowy darkness, a manifestation of the malevolence that fueled his dark prowess. "You are strong, hero, but haven't you realized it? Are you this much of a fool? Be quiet, demon, the time for words has ended, accept your fate at the end of my blade." "I see. Then die." The demon clad in pitch-black armor unleashed a terrifying surge of dark energy, materializing into demonic heads that hurtled themselves toward the so-called hero. However, just before the ghastly heads could collide with the handsome man, his silvery armor emitted a bright glow. Mysterious symbols emerged, weaving into a luminous shield that dispersed the fiendish spell. "How are you able to counter my death spell?" "I am protected by the goddess, your demonic mana has no hold over me." The demon posed the question, swiftly met with a response as the hero charged forward. The clash of these two beings, each wielding immense magical power, unfolded in a more direct and upfront battle. The once majestic castle walls began to crumble under the relentless pressure of their magical and physical attacks. Before long, the combatants burst through the ceiling and continued their fierce duel beneath the vast expanse of the night sky. The confrontation between the hero and the demon elevated to new heights as they soared through the open air, exchanging blows and magical projectiles that illuminated the night. The once gigantic flying castle became riddled with holes from the relentless barrage of attacks before they both landed on a large, flat section of a collapsed roof. As the battle unfolded, it became apparent that one individual was gradually inching toward victory, signaling the impending conclusion of this epic clash. The hero swung his radiant blade with precision, each strike guided by the divine energy coursing through him. The demon countered with dark and twisted spells, yet the blade drew near with every clash. Soon, the demon's arm was severed and disintegrated into rays of light. The demonic individual collapsed onto his knees in defeat. Despite being out of breath, the hero grinned triumphantly and pointed his sword at his fallen adversary. "This is the end for you, Demon King Aberdan. Your reign of terror ends today, humanity has won, and I shall guide them." "Ha ha!" The Demon King began laughing while clutching his shoulder that had been severed along with his arm. Even when he tried to activate his regenerative abilities, it would not regrow due to the corruption of holy energies that had invaded his wound. "What's so funny, fiend? You have lost. You are indeed a mighty hero, but your sheer stupidity overshadows your might. Have you not realized it yet?" The hero didn't release his grip on his blade and his gaze remained fixed on the weakened Demon King. Though his opponent was in a weakened state, the hero understood that it didn't necessarily mean the Demon King was devoid of one last trump card. However, the demon remained on the ground, his eyes fixed on something unfolding behind the hero. "Realized what? I'm not going to fall for your tricks. At least try to die with some dignity." "Oh, I will, but it seems that your so-called allies wish to bury you with me." Laughter erupted from the Demon King's mouth, and it was followed by a brightening of the night sky. The hero, sensing something amiss, turned his head to take a glance. His eyes widened as he saw numerous bright rays streaking through the sky, resembling a massive meteor shower. "No, why would they they were supposed to only activate the Magi Tech cannons if I failed, but I'm still alive, they should know this. After exclaiming in disbelief, the man took out a white medallion from beneath his armor, adorned with a symbol representing the alliance that he was fighting for. Frantically, he activated the medallion, attempting to communicate with his supposed allies and halt the impending disaster. However, to his horror, there was no response. His once allies in his quest against the demonic forces, seemed to have turned a deaf ear to his desperate plea. You see, hero, your allies have abandoned you. Did you really think those bastards would allow someone with as much power as you to exist? You probably don't even know why this war was started in the first place, you were nothing more than a puppet for them all. The hero's eyes widened in realization, and a sinking feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. The meteor shower wasn't meant for the Demon King alone, it was meant to obliterate both the hero and the defeated demon in one fell swoop. Betrayal stung deeper than any wound he had suffered in the battle. In a desperate bid for survival, the hero channeled every ounce of his remaining energy into a protective barrier, creating a shimmering dome around himself and the Demon King. The celestial meteors collided with the magical shield, causing a spectacular explosion of light and energy that sent shockwaves through the sky. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually survive, but he had used up most of his energy in the previous battle. In his current state, he was not much stronger than the average High Knight, and soon the explosions engulfed the entire area, shattering the radiant shield that was supposed to protect him. His body was tossed towards the demonic being he swore to defeat. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the Demon King's eyes filled with pity. Both of them would die this day, and the true perpetrator of their demise would go unpunished. Both individuals were filled with immense rage, but their screams were quickly silenced by the mass of explosions, along with the demon castle exploding with them. The hero and the Demon King, once bitter enemies, now found themselves entwined in the same tragic fate. As the remnants of the flying castle rained down from the sky, the once majestic structure now resembled a celestial funeral pyre and marked the end of an era. The hero's entire life flashed before his eyes, beginning with his arrival in this strange world. Memories of the beautiful princess who welcomed him flooded back. He reminisced about the years of training and hardships he endured to reach this point, only to realize that everything may have been a lie, perhaps planned from the beginning. Yet, his thoughts weren't the only ones present. Strange visions of a younger horned boy filled his dying mind. He witnessed the boy crying over the charred remains of other horned beings, presumably his parents. The boy's sadness and indignation were something he could perceive, along with many more old memories of his past deeds. However, this feeling didn't last long, as both men soon faded away into the void, their consciousness along with them. From a safe distance, the people responsible watched as the shockwaves collided with their armies and magical weaponry responsible for this disaster. There were many individuals here, some showed faces of triumph, others of disgust or uncertainty. The Demon King along with the hero were presences that couldn't be ignored. They all quickly rallied their troops to investigate the crash site. Could he have survived? A woman asked, her voice resonating with authority and a touch of sadness. She stood amidst the gathered group, adorned in an intricate nun's habit that seemed out of place amid the war-torn landscape. Her eyes, however, were sharp and discerning, revealing a depth of wisdom that surpassed her outward appearance. It is unlikely, Sister Seraphina. The explosion was immense, and even someone of his prowess would struggle to survive such a cataclysmic event. We planned to eliminate both the hero and the Demon King, and it seems to have succeeded. A man with a stern expression, clad in elaborate mage robes, responded to Sister Seraphina's question. The moment he brought up the planned assassination, a deep scowl adorned her lovely face. Please don't say it like that, it was all God's will. He would have brought ruin to the kingdom. Ha, whatever makes you sleep at night, lass. A third person decided to chime in, he was shorter than the mage and priestess but a lot wider. In his hand, he was holding a large axe and his red beard covered most of his face. Think what you will, Ungrim. the woman replied while turning away from the laughing dwarf. Soon a fourth member approached the three, a man dressed in intricate armor with a crest adorning his chest plate. The moment he did, many of the surrounding soldiers started to bow, and just the three individuals that were previously talking retained a more casual air about them. If Malachi believes that we were successful, then it is probably so. However, it won't hurt us to verify his death. If it's Prince Leander's wish. Serafina nodded while also looking out into the distance. There a man of unprecedented beauty and elongated ears stood. An elven man of unparalleled grace, observed the aftermath of the cataclysmic event from his vantage point. His keen eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any signs of movement or survivors. The once mighty flying castle had been reduced to smoldering debris, and the area below was scarred by the impact of the celestial meteors. As the armies closed in on the crash site, the elf turned around to leave. Everyone else ignored him and instead ventured towards the scene of devastation. It took them many days to sort through the rubble, but eventually, the mage named Malachi approached the epicenter of the crash, examining the charred remains of the once proud flying castle. His trained eyes scanned the area for any lingering magical residue. After a moment of contemplation, he spoke. There is no doubt. The hero and the Demon King are no more. Our plan was successful. A heavy silence hung in the air as the gravity of their actions settled upon the group. Prince Leander, however, remained composed. His regal demeanor betrayed none of the internal conflict that may have brewed beneath the surface. The hero fulfilled his purpose, and so did the Demon King. Prince Leander said, his voice carrying a sense of closure and relief. The kingdom is safe from the threat they posed. We have accomplished what needed to be done. Gather up their remains, we shall return to the kingdom with good news. Serafina nodded, her expression conflicted but resolute. Ungrim grunted in agreement, still uninterested in the moral intricacies of their actions. Malachi, though seemingly satisfied, couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As the group prepared to leave the desolate scene, a faint whisper of wind carried an echo of distant laughter, a haunting sound that seemed to linger in the air. The three remaining members of the group exchanged uneasy glances, unsure if they were merely imagining things or if the remnants of the hero and Demon King still lingered in some form. Little did they know that the consequences of their actions would unfold in ways they could not anticipate, and the threads of fate were not so easily severed. The epic tale of the hero and the Demon King might have reached its tragic conclusion, but the journey of another was just about to begin. A new life had awakened, a creature without a form, resembling a grey amoeba. It floated comfortably in a void filled with nothing but darkness. The being had just been born, and it had no idea where it was or what it was. It simply floated around without a care for the world, lacking much intelligence to ponder its existence. Having just been created, it knew not of its purpose or whether such a concept was even relevant. It had no care in the world, lacking any real senses besides feeling some sensations on its outer shell, rendering it unable to perceive anything. From time to time, it bumped into other beings just like it, their amoeba-like bodies bouncing off each other as they floated in the vast open space. However, this one, in particular, was a bit more curious than the others. It attempted to bend its body to maneuver around or even poked the other shapeless creatures whenever it collided with them. In the middle of one of these curious outbursts, something novel occurred. A phenomenon made its way into the space filled with shapeless creatures. It was a strange occurrence that elicited a reaction from the many beings in this dark expanse. Most saw it as unfavorable and utilized their limited capabilities to move away, but the curious bundle of grey matter was different. Instead of fleeing, it moved toward the cluster of strange energies, eventually colliding with it. After the contact was made, a bright light flashed, illuminating the void. For a moment, it showcased the endless expanse that these creatures had found themselves in, along with the countless numbers of them. Resembling jellyfish with a more pale coloring, they seemed to be composed not of flesh, but of some other form of energy. The moment the light appeared, they began to scatter and reacted as if the radiance caused them pain. The curious one from among them, who had approached this strange phenomenon, felt something new. Emotions that it had no capacity to comprehend started rushing in. For a moment, it felt anger, then quickly switched to sadness, and again rage took over. Strange visions of worlds and events that it never knew were rushing into its very core, altering it. The entity it made contact with looked like a bundle of white and black energy, and its grey body was now absorbing this peculiar energy form which was causing changes. Its once grey and lackluster body began to shift, the creature was transforming. Initially, the surface turned pure white, shedding the grey tone, and made the amoeba appear as if it were made of pristine white snow. However, not long after, it began to darken. It was as if the absorbed dark and radiant energies were engaged in a battle inside this new being's body. The newborn creature was experiencing something new, pain. Its entire body was being torn apart by the conflicting energies, and during the ordeal, strange images presented themselves. At one point, it saw a peculiar being with pointy things protruding from its head. This being was surrounded by other similar individuals, all bowing before it as if in worship. Shortly after, the vision shifted to a new individual, this one devoid of any pointy extremities and surrounded by fewer creatures that were showcasing peculiar expressions that it didn't understand. Together with these images, the formless being was receiving a lot of information. Its senses were becoming overloaded with everything it was experiencing and its body was about to collapse. To preserve itself, it attempted to counteract these two conflicting energies by attempting to contain them within its body. Miraculously, it succeeded, and its form, which had been shifting between two colors, settled into a darkened silver luster that remained. Proto-nucleus has evolved into divine demon nucleus. Something echoed throughout its being as it finalized its form. The shape of its body remained somewhat similar, but it had grown twice in size. The grayish tone was no more, replaced by a shiny dark silver shell. The information overflow that it had been fighting against had settled down, but the energies were still present. However, before this being could ponder its situation, a new occurrence hit the empty void. Suddenly, strange rifts started appearing everywhere. They produced various colors and beckoned to the residents of the void. The other grayish amoebas were drawn to these rifts and willingly entered through them. The curious one didn't feel as compelled as the others, but one of the openings seemed to be calling out to it. Slowly, it ignored the previous events and headed toward the rift, answering the beckoning call. A-R-I-S-E. As it went through the rift in space, it felt as if it were traversing through something akin to a strange membrane, requiring effort to push itself through. Due to its enlarged body, it became momentarily stuck within the rift. After shifting back and forth a few times, it managed to squeeze itself through. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over it as it found itself in an unfamiliar place. Its senses expanded further, and it felt as if it were changing its shape to fill something up. Seer, V. Protect. Te, Troy. Arise. The voice became more audible than before, and the commanding tone was apparent. The being was instructed to arise, and so it tried. It managed to open its eyes, or in this case, something different which allowed it to fill its vision with the new scenery. The void from which it came was no more, replaced by an unfamiliar landscape. As it attempted to move, it sensed that the shapeless body it had previously occupied had also transformed. It observed strange protrusions that weren't malleable but instead allowed only rigid movement. The newborn being attempted to move these new limbs, and when it did, a strange screeching sound was produced, followed by a lot of rattling as the being tried to propel the new body forward. Progress was slow, but it was beginning to understand how to use this new body, which was somewhat similar to the memories it had been given. The being identified the upper limbs as arms and the lower ones as legs, which it could move. The only problem was the loud, distinct sound that it could now hear whenever it tried to do something. After a few moments, this same sound attracted some unwelcome guests, more creatures walking on two legs but somewhat different. These creatures weren't identical but shared similar parts from which its body was created. They were draped over their limbs, and one was even wearing an almost exact replica of its own body. Dot. Dot. There were 3 beings in total, and they produced a strange sound from their upper orifices, which this new being identified as mouths. The memories continued to flow in, but it could not yet understand the language being spoken. Its contemplation was interrupted by the voice it had previously heard, giving it a direct order. Protect, kill, destroy. The message was quite clear, and when it glanced into its right hand, it noticed some type of metallic object there. In response to the voice's demand, it felt somewhat enraged. It raised the object it was holding and started moving towards the trio. It felt an urgent need to protect this place, to kill whoever was here, to destroy everyone in its path. It charged forth, producing various screeching and clacking noises. Its footsteps echoed throughout the place, and it took in the new sensation of sound while trying to fulfill the order. Soon, it swung the metal object at the first person in front of it, ready to take the head with one quick movement. However, it did not go as the newborn being had planned. As it swung down to hit its target, the person just moved out of the way. Instead of hitting the living being, the metal weapon collided with the ground. At this point, something struck its chest area, sending it flying against the wall. The moment it collided with the wall, a metallic clang echoed through the area, and it could feel that some of its limbs had been torn apart. One of them landed on the floor, while another one rolled into the distance, where one of the beings it was trying to attack stepped on it. Dot. Unable to fully comprehend the words of the other beings, it could identify that the tone was mocking its demise. Before it could stand up again, a fast-moving object collided with its head, sending it flying into the air. It rolled around the area before coming to a stop close to one of its enemy's feet. At this point, it could see the rusted-over body that it once occupied, a strange metallic shell that mimicked the humanoid form. It began to blame the voice that had ordered it towards its demise for this failure. The enemies it faced were far too strong, and the body it was given was far too weak. It could only remain in that spot as the beings it now identified as humans clobbered it over the head with a heavy metal object. It could not resist, nor could it restore itself back to its previous shape. Soon, its vision went blurry, and nothing but the void awaited it. This place was different. It was not the same void that it had been created but something much colder and devoid of anything else. The feeling was uncomfortable, but soon it heard the same voice once more. "Arise, minion!" It was much clearer than before, and it found itself being summoned yet again. As the being was called forth from the void, it felt a surge of energy. This time, it emerged in a different environment. It found itself standing in a dimly lit chamber surrounded by strange symbols and runes on the walls. The air was thick with an otherworldly essence, and the being realized that it had taken the same form as before. The more it existed, the clearer the memories became. It started comprehending its existence as some sort of metallic creature. It looked at its limbs, mostly rusted over plates of metal. Many small holes within its body continuously produced loud sounds, something it now realized was not conducive to survival. Learning quickly from its last encounter, it understood that the more it moved, the more likely a group of humanoid assailants would arrive to slay it. Not sure what to do, it observed the changed scenery and found itself in a collapsed temple. Before it was a small circular basin with some water, and upon glancing into it, it saw its head, which looked like a helmet that would be adorned by something called a knight. With the help of the memories it was gaining, it acquired more knowledge, allowing it to identify itself. It was a monster found in places called dungeons, categorized as living armor. This revelation didn't help much, but as it focused on the reflection showing a rusted piece of armor, a strange feeling washed over it. The creature desired to know more about itself and what it was. Suddenly, as it tried to decipher its origin, something strange appeared before it. Floating words with strange symbols began to materialize, and it started to slowly understand. If it was correct, then this thing before it was called a status screen, and it had all the information that this creature desired. Classification: Damaged corroded bronze armor F, L1. Type: Magical/Inorganic. Hit points HP 10/10. Magic points MP 10/10. Special points SP 10/10. Strength 5F. Agility 1F. Dexterity 2F. Constitution 5F. Intelligence 2F. Wisdom 5F. Willpower 2F. Durability F. A lone, corroded suit of armor stood before a basin of water, gazing at a strange table that had appeared. Whenever it tried to grab it with one of its metallic hands, it just phased through. After a few attempts, it gave up, realizing that perhaps there were some things in this world that couldn't be touched but only looked at. Soon, it started focusing on the numbers and letters presented to it, unsure of their significance. It didn't know if a higher number was better or perhaps the lower one. It also noticed the prevalence of one particular letter F. Next to it, there was a little line that it identified as meaning something lesser. This letter accompanied a series of strange numbers and was placed in a bracket next to it. The living suit of armor knew that there was some meaning to this, but it wasn't quite sure. This was not the only thing it could see on this screen. As it continued to stare and poke at it, a secondary one appeared on the side. There were more tables there, but they were smaller, filled with text, and separated. When looking at the first screen, it managed to decipher the letters above it, which gave it the name status screen, and the words below it were supposed to be basic attributes. When looking at the other screen, it got the word skill list from it. For the time being, it took its time to try to go through these skills it had. Basic power / active skill. Perform a powerful / attack. Lesser metal body. Passive skill. Increases the body's defense. Defense is dependent on durability. There wasn't really much to look at there as it was mostly empty. It somewhat understood the first two skills but wasn't aware what was the problem with the last one. It was filled with question marks, and even if it continued to stare at it, nothing happened. Was this a good amount of skills or was it not? The memories that it absorbed were indicating that it wasn't a good thing, and after recalling his first defeat, it had to agree. Who am I? Am I weak? What is my purpose here? What is this place? Why do I have to protect it? The creature moved past the status screen as it started asking itself more questions. It had been compelled by the strange voice to attack those beings, but now it didn't know what to do. It had lost and was destroyed, but somehow it had returned to this world in the same form as previously. The feelings that it was going through were strange and it didn't like what it was feeling. I am, not it. I am something. What am I? The monster started hearing a voice inside of its head, and it could identify it as a sort of internal monologue. Its thoughts were becoming clearer and it was starting to comprehend that it was some sort of being. It looked at the status screen and started going through the words. It took a moment, but it was able to read the classification that was presented there. Am I damaged corroded bronze armor? Or not? There was something that didn't fit there. It could understand what a name was, but this description felt a bit foreign. It could comprehend that a name wasn't like that. There was a feeling associated with it, something more intimate, more familiar. The monster armor continued to read the name constantly and finally reached an epiphany. Damaged armor. Bronze armor. Corroded bronze armor. Corroded armor. Corroded? That doesn't sound right. What is corroded? This new being started to ponder his existence and the meaning behind this word. Soon another word entered his mind that had a similar definition but affected a different type of metal, rust. For some reason, this resonated with its very being, and at that moment, it made a decision. The open status window started to shift around. It was as if the world had taken notice of the decision and decided to alter things according to the will of the metallic creature. The clacking and corroded body started shining in a pale light as if something had changed, and before the monster could figure it out, another window popped up in front of it. The named monster title has been acquired. New words appeared on the status screen which the monster now called Rusty examined thoroughly. Name: Rusty. Classification: damaged corroded bronze armor F, L1. Type: magical/inorganic. Hit points HP: 15/15. Magic points MP: 15/15. Special points SP: 15/15. Strength: 10F. Agility: 6F. Dexterity: 7F. Constitution: 10F. Intelligence: 7F. Wisdom: 10F. Willpower: 7F. Durability: F. Named monster. Title: a title gained by a monster possessing a name. It offers various bonuses and opens new evolution options. The title appeared in the section related to his skills and was somehow moved to the side as if it was different than the rest. After reading the explanation, Rusty didn't really understand the meaning, but he was sure that he knew the word evolution. He instinctively knew that it was something important for his future survival. Besides the addition to the name, it witnessed the numbers going up, more than doubling in some places. Rusty felt that the body was starting to move a bit better and that he could exert more force with his metallic limbs. His mind had become clearer, and the most important thing he discovered was a strange sense of himself. I am a he. Previously, Rusty couldn't see himself as anything other than a genderless creature, but now he was convinced that he was male. It was something that the memories he had absorbed before were, for once, agreeing upon. Now armed with a newfound sense of self, Rusty, the living armor, was ready to tackle a new issue. It involved this place that he found himself around, the voice that was telling him things he should be doing, and the strange denizens that were walking around him. Rusty was not the only one living here, as there were other monsters beside him. As he was finishing up identifying himself, another creature walked past him. It looked a lot different than him, as it was not made out of metal but instead just bones. Rusty didn't know what this being was, but it didn't seem too interested in the metallic being before it. The skeletal thing rattled past him without stopping and went on its merry way as if nothing was wrong. "What is that?" he asked himself while glancing at the strange walking pile of bones. The shape was similar to his, but it was much thinner. The way it walked was also different, but it was still had a humanoid shape. The more Rusty stared at the creature, the more he was interested, and to his surprise he started seeing some words hovering about the monster's head. Lesser Skeleton L1. There it was, the identity of the being he was trying to identify, and just like with his last find, another pop-up window had been triggered. This time Rusty wasn't as surprised as before, and he just read what he had received. Identification skill has been acquired. This one was added to the skill screen under Skills. Identify. Passive skill. A skill used for identifying the unknown. While this was similar to the title, Rusty noticed that there was something different. This time around no numbers went up. It seemed that these titles were different from skills, or at least from this one he had gotten here. After acquiring this new skill, he also noticed something peculiar. It was as if information related to it was injected into the core of its very being. He instinctively knew what it was for, and to test it, he looked down at something. Identification. Rock. Just a regular looking rock. Oh. Identification. Dungeon floor. The floor inside of a dungeon. Identification. Water. Just some water, it could be dirty. Identification. Rubble. Rough fragmented stones that were once part of something. Rusty wasn't sure what to make of this skill. It felt like these descriptions didn't really offer anything new. The strange memories that he had been slowly digesting were more useful. Nevertheless, it was an interesting thing to do, and he continued to look around this darkened chamber. Identification. Destroyed statue. Once a depiction of a goddess that was part of a temple. The statue reminded him of one of the human beings that he encountered recently. The features were more feminine than masculine, and it seemed that there was a wing attached to the statue part that had mostly been destroyed. As he was examining this thing before him, a sound resounded within his being to inform him about something new again. Congratulations, identification skill has reached level 2. Oh! Level 2. The skill it had been using had apparently leveled up, and it informed him about the possibilities. Rusty started becoming aware that leveling up skills was somehow advantageous, and a higher number was always better than a lower one. Eventually, the piece of living armor moved on from this issue as it re-evaluated itself and its capabilities. In his right hand, he was holding a weapon that, with his newly gained identification skill, he could name. It was a corroded sword that looked similar to his damaged metallic body. It didn't look sharp nor that it would last for long, but it was his. His body wasn't too fast as he was lumbering around and seemingly around the same speed as the lesser skeletons here. The boost it received from gaining the title raised his attributes slightly, but he didn't feel that much powerful, and none of the letters had changed either. Patrol. Move. Protect. As he was trying to figure some more things out, the voice inside of his head started echoing again. It felt like it was crackling a bit in some parts and that it was slightly quieter, but he was still forced to obey. Before him, a strange path emerged. It was as if he was looking at the scenery from a different vantage point as the information was given. He knew that the voice wanted him to move to a certain spot in this place, and he was compelled to do its bidding. Who are you? Did you make me? Rusty was intrigued by the disembodied voice, but it didn't answer his inquiry. It remained silent, and then after a minute had passed, it repeated the same message as before. This time around, the living armor heeded the call, as it felt that something bad would happen if it didn't. Soon, it was moving through this strange place in which it had appeared, the void it came from now nothing more than a distant memory. Previously it was impossible to take a good look at everything, but now he was seeing many new things. His identification skill went into overdrive as he continued to use it on everything that he could see. Rusty felt a strange connection to the environment as if it was alive. The dark chamber was filled with all sorts of things, crumbled statues, shattered pillars, remains of unidentified creatures, and many corridors illuminated by braziers. As Rusty moved forward, he encountered more creatures similar to the lesser skeleton he had observed earlier. They varied in appearance and also gear. Besides swords, they were holding spears, maces, and shields. Some of them were even wearing rusty armor similar to the body that he was made of. This was not the only type of monster, as he witnessed beings that were the same as him. The moment he encountered another corroded armor, he was ecstatic. Immediately he made his way towards one to greet it, but even after he arrived before it, the other piece of armor didn't acknowledge his existence. It was the same with the skeletons. It was as if they couldn't see him or even each other. All they did was lumber around this place, moving along similar paths that he was ordered to. After a series of encounters with different monsters, Rusty started to notice patterns in their behavior. It became apparent that these creatures were not acting independently but rather operating under some unseen influence. The voice in Rusty's head, the strange paths that emerged before him, and the scripted movements of the monsters hinted at a controlling force, orchestrating the events within the dungeon. This force also affected him, but for some strange reason, he felt that he could resist it to some extent. While he felt compelled to take the path that he was given, for brief moments he could venture away from it. When he tried, he would be reminded by the voice constantly until he returned to the correct spot. It was something that was starting to annoy him, but at this time, he was unable to free himself from this outside influence. After a few hours of exploration, he found himself in a wide-open chamber with various other monsters. Just like in the corridors, it had many torches or braziers lighting it up, but also some light was coming from a small crack in the ceiling. It contrasted with everything else, and Rusty was intrigued. He ventured forth toward the illuminated spot that was falling radiating tree onto a tree stump. Rusty was drawn to something there, a lone green leaf that was resting on a thin branch. It was an anomaly in this dark, rusted dungeon, and he couldn't help but feel a strange connection to it. Reaching out with his metallic hand, he gently picked up the leaf, marveling at its vibrant green color. It felt fragile yet alive, a stark contrast to his own damaged and corroded form. Just like before, he tried to identify this object, and to his surprise he was given an answer rather quickly. Identification. Leaf of Vitality. Once consumed, rises the Constitution attribute slightly. Consume. Rusty was interested but also confused. He was a sentient piece of armor, not a true living being who could eat or consume things. This thing was supposed to raise his constitution by a certain amount, but he wasn't sure how this consumption should take place. He tried recalling some of the memories he had access to, and images of humanoid creatures putting things into their upper orifices emerged. Like this. The type of suit of armor that he was had a proper helmet and a visor. He mimicked the visions from his memories by opening this visor and putting the leaf of vitality into his helmet. However, it didn't seem to have worked, as the leaf just ended up falling into the empty space that was the inside of his armor. It remained there without having its essence consumed or absorbed, and his constitution never was raised. He was somehow confused, but the identification skill probably didn't lie. There was perhaps a way to get something out of this green item. However, before he could take another crack at it, something in the distance occurred. One of the skeletons started producing a strange shriek while charging towards a dimly lit corridor. Soon after, its skull came flying out of the opening and alerted the other monsters within. All of them, along with Rusty, looked at three individuals emerging from within. At first, he thought that it was the same ones that had caused his previous demise, but after closer inspection, Rusty realized that these were different. One was a human clad in worn-out armor, carrying a sword that looked like it had seen better days. Another was someone with elongated ears with a bow slung across their back, and the third was a lot shorter, wielding a massive warhammer. Their expressions were serious, and their eyes scanned the surroundings as if they were expecting trouble. That, on, SW, edit. However, there was a fourth individual that none of the monsters, and neither him, had previously seen. A more slender-looking person was hanging on the wall and shouting something to the group of three that had just charged in. Rusty was starting to decipher their language, but he still wasn't quite sure what they were trying to communicate. Kill. Rusty felt a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The voice in his head was loud, and he felt compelled to move forward. The recent memory of having himself smacked by similar creatures was still vivid. The sensation after his demise was uncomfortable, and he did not want to repeat it. However, he was feeling something else, something that made his metal body tremble, and he somehow identified it as the feeling of excitement. Three adventurers burst into a spacious chamber teeming with low-level monsters. The skirmish commenced as they swiftly dismantled an undead skeleton, triggering a small wave of other creatures to surge toward them. Despite being outnumbered, they showed no signs of perturbation in the face of adversity. As they advanced through the corridor, a fourth member of their party emerged before them. A woman, clad in light leather armor, had concealed herself from the creatures, clinging to the wall unnoticed. "What's wrong? You gave us the signal. We have a problem." "What happened?" one of the adventurers asked the woman who descended from the wall with a somewhat annoyed tone. "One of those things ate the leaf." "It ate the leaf?" "Yes, I told you that it ate it, so it ate it. It's one of those living armor things." The adventurers exchanged glances, a mix of confusion and intrigue painted on their faces. They had encountered various monsters in dungeons before, but the idea of a living suit of armor consuming something was beyond their usual experiences. "Are you sure? Living armor that eats vitality leaves?" "I'm telling you, it happened. It picked up the leaf and put it in its helmet, and then the leaf disappeared inside." The adventurers redirected their attention to the open chamber, where a rusty suit of armor stood. The creature appeared to be observing them, its visor emitting an almost inquisitive vibe. It was encircled by various skeletal monsters and a few others of its kind, but it was the sole one that remained stationary, distinguishing itself from the advancing pack of creatures. "Well, we can't let it go. That leaf is crucial for our mission, and we need to complete it to get the money. Let's take care of the undead first, try not to damage that rusty armor monster. Those leaves are delicate." The leader of the group, who seemed to be the human clad in worn-out armor, shouted out some orders while the other three nodded. The adventurers quickly formulated a strategy, efficiently dispatching the oncoming small horde of monsters while ensuring they avoided harming the peculiar living armor. Unbeknownst to them, the corroded suit of armor kept his eye on them, intrigued by how they behaved. The way they moved, coordinated, and fought together was quite fascinating. Is this called strategy? The way they move seems to be with purpose. Rusty, the living armor, was among the group of monsters in this large dungeon chamber. Initially appearing ordinary, they cleverly utilized the rubble to their advantage. The adventurers observed how they strategically manipulated the environment, compelling the monsters to approach in a specific manner and avoiding confrontations with more than one or two at a time. Clearly, they were using the surroundings to prevent getting surrounded, something that seemed unfavorable. Despite an initial urge to charge in mindlessly, Rusty managed to restrain himself from attacking the group of living beings. His previous encounter had imparted some valuable experience, leading him to believe that repeating the same tactic would yield similar results. Instead, he chose to observe while his more impulsive allies risked their lives. Eventually, an idea began to form in his mind. What if he used the same environment to his advantage and approached the group from somewhere the other monsters weren't? As the battle between the adventurers and the monsters unfolded, Rusty adeptly navigated through the shadows, applying his newfound understanding of strategy. Amidst the noise of clashing weapons, monster roars, and occasional shouts from the coordinating adventurers, the screeching sound produced by Rusty's corroded armor went unnoticed. Stealthily advancing through the chaos, he approached the group from an unexpected angle. The adventurers, engrossed in the ongoing battle, appeared to overlook the lone suit of armor, which seemed indistinguishable from many others. While Rusty got closer, he began to analyze the adventurers' skills and tactics. The one in worn-out armor exhibited remarkable strength and durability, deflecting attacks with a well-worn sword. The archer with elongated ears showed incredible accuracy and agility, effortlessly dodging incoming strikes while firing arrows with precision. The shorter member of the party wielded a massive warhammer, delivering powerful blows that could crush bones and armor alike. Kill. His mind surged with animosity toward the group of four, the internal voice making it increasingly difficult to focus until it became unbearable. Sword in hand, Rusty finally succumbed to the urges and leaped out from behind a thick, collapsed pillar. Though his initial plan had been to take his time and approach while his brethren kept the adventurers busy, even with this hasty approach, he successfully closed the gap. "Hey! Watch out!" The leader of the adventurers called out to the long-eared person that Rusty was targeting. The man in worn-out armor swiftly positioned himself between Rusty and the elven individual. In this impulsive leap, Rusty felt a surge of excitement as he tightly gripped his sword with both hands and swung downward. Instinctively activating his skill, Basic Power Slash, a red glow enveloped his weapon. The speed of the downward swing hastened, and he sensed the weight increasing. This was his opportunity to defeat his enemy. His opponent hastily raised his sword to guard, and Rusty's sword connected. The man, slightly off balance and caught off guard by the surprise attack, couldn't fully block the corroded weapon. Rusty experienced a sense of achievement, envisioning his sword connecting with the man's shoulder and cleanly severing it. However, there was a crucial factor he hadn't taken into account: the durability of the weapon he was wielding. The adventurer leader wore a worn-out suit of armor that protected critical parts of his body, including the shoulder Rusty had targeted. At the moment Rusty's sword connected with this metallic armor, the weapon gave out. Instead of witnessing the man's shoulder being torn to pieces, the corroded sword was shattered. The only evidence left behind was an indentation where Rusty's power slash had landed. Shitty piece of armor. His opponent seethed with rage. Although the hit didn't penetrate, the leader of the adventurers felt sharp pain emanating from the afflicted shoulder. Now without a weapon, Rusty attempted to tackle his enemy. However, just like before, a boot landed on his chest plate, propelling him back toward the collapsed pillar where he had been hiding. Despite the heightened stats from gaining the title, he was unable to react in time. As his back collided with the rubble, some of his armor pieces scattered to the sides. "This is getting annoying, let's clean these fuckers up." The battle continued with more vigor as the adventurers took it a bit more seriously now. It was impossible for the low-level monsters to even land one good hit on the party of 4. The difference in skill, experience, and power was too drastic. There was no way that the monsters could win. Even if they outnumbered the party 5-1, they all fell after getting hit once or twice. Rusty struggled to stand amidst the scattered armor pieces. Missing a leg and an arm, with some of the other plates fallen off, he found himself unable to reassemble as the connections between the pieces were lost. Before he could react, another blow struck his body, this time delivered by the shortest adventurer wielding a big warhammer. "Hey, be careful, one of them has the leaf inside." The slender one from the group shouted at the stocky one, who didn't seem to care that much. Soon the battle was over, with the adventurers emerging victorious against the remaining monsters. The chamber, once teeming with undead creatures and living armors, now echoed with the sounds of heavy breathing and the clinking of weapons being sheathed. "Ha, that could have gone better. Is everyone all right?" Indeed. As the dust settled, the adventurers regrouped, assessing the situation. The leader, still nursing his injured shoulder, shifted his focus to the battered living armors they intentionally didn't fully destroy. His attention honed in on one lying next to a pillar, exhibiting a hammer-shaped hole through its chest. "That vitality leaf better be in one of these damn armors." Frustration marked the leader's tone, aggravated by the injury to his shoulder. He then turned to the woman who had been in the chamber beforehand, noticing her annoyance with what he was insinuating. "What? You don't believe me? Why would I lie?" The leader sighed, acknowledging the glare from his party member. Nonetheless, still seething from the encounter, he chose to vent his frustration on the armor that had caused him pain. With one smooth kick, the helmet went flying to the side and landed between the legs of the female party member. She picked it up, still frowning. At this point, Rusty had not been slain, and could feel a strange sensation inside his broken body. The leader of the adventurers had thrust his hand through the hole, searching for the leaf that Rusty had swallowed. However, something else occupied Rusty's thoughts as he came to a realization: he was extremely weak. The gap in power and speed against these humanoid creatures was insurmountable. Even after sneaking up and activating his strongest skill, he couldn't inflict any serious damage on his opponent. The situation was profoundly disheartening for the young monster, unsure of what course of action to take. Given a body and a set of skills that weren't particularly impressive, Rusty experienced a peculiar feeling within his core, yet couldn't fully comprehend it. The desire to become stronger and achieve victory welled up within him, but the path forward remained unclear. The situation felt increasingly hopeless, and a sense of impending demise lingered, reminiscent of his previous defeat. "There it is, you were actually right. See, I told you." It became evident that once the leaf was extracted from his body, Rusty would lose any significance to the party of adventurers. His brethren were undergoing the same fate, being searched and subsequently hammered to death. Rusty resigned himself to an inevitable demise, preparing to enter the void once more. Yet, to his surprise, one member of the party did something unexpected. "Hey, what are you doing? Never doubt me again, you idiot!" In a fit of anger, the woman stuck Rusty's helmet onto the party leader's head. She playfully stuck out her tongue in his direction, while the other two party members laughed at her childish behavior. It appeared that she was merely being playful, and no one made a big deal out of it. However, for Rusty, seeing his helmet on the man's head changed the perspective. Compatible skills have been found. Please choose a skill that you want to learn. The voice that had been updating him whenever a skill or title was gained began to speak again. Time seemed to slow down as Rusty was presented with the opportunity to choose from the 3 options laid before him. Universal language. Passive skill. Allows a person to understand spoken words and writing of the universal language. Basic power thrust. Active skill. Perform a powerful thrust attack. Basic swordsmanship. Passive skills. A skill that makes it easier to wield a sword, is required to unlock more powerful sword skills. What is this? Rusty found himself pondering, having never seen something like this before. While he understood the concept of skills, acquiring them in this manner was something new. Weighing his options, he considered the first one, which would help him understand these creatures better, but deemed it unnecessary given the knowledge from the memories he was granted. The power thrust seemed intriguing, likely an alternate version of his power/skill. However, when he examined the third option, his decision was clear. What he needed were more potent skills, not ones similar to what he already possessed. Basic swordsmanship offered the prospect of acquiring such skills, making it the obvious choice for him to pursue. Do you wish to learn the basic swordsmanship passive skill? Please confirm to begin the process. After concentrating on the third option, the voice resounded inside his head once more. It asked him if he wanted to learn the skill and presented 2 choices. There was a large green button with the word yes on it and another red one with the word no. Rusty had made up his mind and quickly gazed at the big green button, waiting with anticipation. Soon after, he heard the voice again, and the process began. Beginning the process of skill absorption. Please wait as the skill is absorbed from the host. Haha, you made her mad again. Hey, come back, hey. The adventurer whose head Rusty now occupied felt that something was off. The moment the helmet settled onto his head felt strange, but he didn't think much of it. There wasn't supposed to be any danger involved since the creature had been defeated, and even if it were alive, without being connected to the body, the helmet wasn't deemed dangerous. However, as he tried to remove it, he found it unyielding. The hell? It won't come off? What is with this thing? Stop pretending, if you think that'll start feeling bad for you. No, I'm not joking, this thing won't come off, ugh, my head. To everyone's surprise, it didn't seem like their party leader was faking it. A moment after the helmet settled on his head, he found himself going down onto one knee as sharp pain took over. It felt like his head was being pierced by something, and he couldn't do anything about it. Even after clutching the helmet with all his might, he could not pry it off, and it began to glow, indicating that something indeed was happening. Gee, get this thing off me! The adventurers frantically tried to assist their leader, but the helmet resisted all attempts to be removed. The glow intensified, enveloping both the helmet and the leader's head. They didn't know what was happening, but it wasn't anything good. The dwarven member of the party finally decided to do something more drastic as he grasped his warhammer and told the others to back away. Keep still, Wait, what if you? There is no time, lass. Do it. There was no way for them to know what was transpiring, and their leader understood this fact. He lowered his hands so that his dwarven companion could take aim. The other 2 looked at the predicament with concern in their eyes, realizing that they couldn't simply pry the helmet off with her grip strength alone. Soon, the large hammer flew at the corroded helmet at a precise angle. Thanks to the dwarf's excellent aiming skill, after the impact, the helmet flew right off and landed to the side. The human leader's head was bruised and bleeding, but he was still alive. Quickly, the others rushed to his side, pouring a red liquid over the wound. Miraculously, it seemed to alleviate the pain and mend the hole that had been left behind. Leader, are you okay? Do I look okay to you? The man responded to the elven companion as his eyes scanned the chamber for the helmet that had caused him pain. Quickly grabbing the dwarf's large hammer, he charged at the source of his problems. The helmet was promptly squished and shattered under the harder metal, leaving nothing but bent pieces behind. The other adventurers watched as their leader relentlessly flattened the piece of living armor until there was almost nothing left. Out of breath, he moved towards the remains of the armor's body and promptly delivered retribution as well. At this point, the one responsible for his pain was no more, as Rusty found himself traveling through the void once again. Unbeknownst to the adventurers who believed they had defeated the monster, Rusty was being restored by the forces inside this dungeon. In another corner of the dungeon, a new suit of corroded armor began to shiver as life was bestowed upon it. Occupied by the entity that had caused the adventurer leader a great deal of grief, for some reason, it held both of its metallic hands up as if cheering itself on. Despite having been defeated, it seemed unfazed, as this encounter had given it something new, and perhaps this was how it could become stronger. Name: Rusty. Classification: Damaged corroded bronze armor F, L1. Type: Magical/inorganic. Hit points HP 15/15. Magic points MP 5/15. Special points SP 0/15. Strength 10F. Agility 6F. Dexterity 7F. Constitution 10F. Intelligence 7F. Wisdom 10F. Willpower 7F. Durability F. A lone armor stood around two identical beings, but it was certainly not the same. The way it moved and articulated was strange. Even now it was swinging its arms around wildly while looking at something before it. The two other suits that were there didn't react to the peculiarities of their brethren, nor were they capable of it. It's there. I became stronger. Rusty rejoiced while looking at the skill window with two brand new skills. One of them was the one that he absorbed from the adventurer, while the other appeared out of seemingly nowhere. He could only assume that it was the one that he couldn't previously identify, as all the question marks were gone. Skill absorption. Active skill. Allows the user to absorb and learn compatible skills if certain criteria are met. Basic swordsmanship. Passive skills. A skill that makes it easier to wield a sword is required to unlock more powerful sword skills. The question marks have disappeared. I wonder why. He was curious as before, but his curiosity was overshadowed by his joy. Two new skills had been gained, which had to mean that he was stronger in some way. The basic swordsmanship skill was already at work, as he could feel the movements of his corroded sword becoming better. It was somehow telling him how to guide it and increased his offensive capabilities to some extent. But how did that work? Rusty recalled the strange incident with the human adventurer. He had been defeated yet again, but after a part of his body was placed on the human's head, the skill was activated. Being a sentient suit of armor, he didn't perceive the head as part of those beings. His helmet could come off if he wanted, and at this moment, he took it off. The slit in the visor acted like his eyes, but he could move his body even when it wasn't touching it. While pondering, he attempted to rub his metallic chin, but his helmet had been placed down on a large rock. As he contemplated this situation, some audible noises entered his non-existent ears. On the sides, two other living armors were lumbering around, and when he glanced at them, he had an idea. Quickly, he grabbed his own head and appeared before his brethren. What if I do this? Armed with some inspiration, he grabbed the helmet of his look-alike. The other living armor monster who was walking by stopped in its tracks but didn't attack. It had become clear that these beings didn't see him as an enemy, as the voice that commanded them all kept everyone in check. Once the other monster's helmet was removed, he used his body to carry over his own helmet and replaced the old one. It didn't work. To Rusty's surprise, he didn't hear the voice of the world that had previously presented him with a choice of 3 skills, it had not appeared. The feeling that was present when he occupied the human's head was also different, it seemed that he couldn't use his new skill in this way. However, he did not stop with just this one test and instead moved on to the second piece of corroded armor to try it on them. Not working. The feeling was the same, and soon the corroded armor went out to patrol their designated dungeon spot. Rusty was left confused about the issue, but this didn't stop him from approaching a different type of monster, one of the skeletons that occupied this dungeon. It was the most prevalent type here, and they carried various weapons, not just swords. Thus, he approached one that was holding a sword along with a shield that looked like a washboard. The monster stopped after a metallic helmet was placed on its head, but it surprisingly didn't look that out of place. Skill absorption has failed to activate, the cooldown period has not ended yet. Please wait until the cooldown period has ended. Oh! The voice of what he only knew as the world echoed inside his metallic head. It provided him with an explanation and also gave him a series of numbers that were constantly changing. If he understood this correctly, then he would need to wait a prolonged amount of time before this skill could be activated again. Hey, wait! As he contemplated this newly gained knowledge, the skeleton friend that he had placed his head on started moving away. To his surprise, this monster was rather fast, and he needed to give it his all to keep up with the pace. It took him a good few minutes before he was able to regain his helmet. The timer that had been presented had been lowered during this time and confirmed his previous assumption. With not much else to do but wait, he decided to explore this large dungeon. Move! The voice resounded inside his head and forced him to patrol like the rest, but without any enemies around, he was able to get a better look at the dungeon he occupied. There were many corridors, some quite tight while others were spacious. Rusty navigated the corridors with the clanking sounds of his corroded armor echoing through the dungeon. The walls were adorned with dimly lit torches, casting flickering shadows that danced along the cold stone surfaces. As he explored, he stumbled upon a peculiar spacious chamber that was devoid of most of what the others had. The only eye-catching thing inside was a large staircase leading down. This was not the patrol route that the voice wanted him to take, as he was just passing through, but for some reason, this piqued his interest. Once inside, he made his way towards the stairs, and there he experienced something strange. He was not able to move down the stairs, and even approaching them was quite hard. Rusty tried to analyze the situation. It seemed as if an invisible force was preventing him from descending the stairs. Frustrated but determined, he attempted to take a running start, but just as he was about to approach the opening to the stairs, the voice resounded. It was much louder and seemed angered by the attempt to go down this wide set of stairs. Leave, forbidden! Rusty froze in place, his metal frame trembling with the force of the command echoing in his head. The voice was not one to be ignored, and the sheer power behind the words made it clear that descending those stairs was not an option. As the echoes of the command subsided, Rusty hesitated for a moment. The desire to explore the forbidden depths of the dungeon clashed with the overwhelming compulsion to obey the voice. It was a peculiar situation that he did not have an answer for, but it seemed that he was stuck for now. With a reluctant sigh, or the metallic equivalent of it, Rusty turned away from the stairs and resumed his designated patrol. The voice seemed appeased, and as he moved through the dungeon corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this place than met the eye. The dungeon was not just a maze of stone walls and dimly lit torches, it held secrets and hidden passages that piqued Rusty's curiosity. Although his primary purpose was to follow the commands of the voice, the desire to uncover the mysteries of the dungeon grew stronger within him. As Rusty continued his patrol, he encountered other monsters. Besides the previously encountered skeletons and living armors like himself, there were also strange small creatures called goblins. Other species that he encountered were spiders who liked to crawl up on the ceilings and hide in dark places. Then there were smaller things like rats and insectoids. The green ones didn't seem to like him too much, as when he approached they started throwing rocks at him. There was something different about them, as if they had their own little section of the dungeon just for themselves. The voice inside his head also kept him from venturing forth into the areas that were marked by strange totems. After getting to know more of the denizens of this dungeon, Rusty also noticed one thing. Each one of them had a certain number applied to their classification. Skeleton L3. Mine is at 1, will I get stronger if it goes up, just like with the skills. Rusty's identification skill was the only one that had been going up, and as it increased in levels, more information was produced when he identified things around him. Previously, he couldn't even see the levels of his dungeon brethren. Now he knew that there was some way of becoming stronger, but how would he achieve this? Would it just go up by itself, or was there something to it? Then the answer somehow presented itself to him, as he was walking through one of the smaller corridors and passing next to another living armor. They bumped into each other. The two staggered for a moment while being pushed against the side walls. You have gained +1 experience points. Hey! Rusty heard something that he never heard before, and when glancing at his status screen, a leftover log was still there. He had gained an experience point, and the source of this was something that was stuck on his pauldron. After bumping into the other corroded suit of armor, he squished a small monster arachnid onto the wall. It was quite small and just died from the weight, but it still counted. The spider was turned into some green goop that was running down the wall. Rusty gave the dead creature a few pokes before opening up his status screen to look for a few more answers, and there he discovered another new number that had gone up. There was an actual indicator for gaining levels, and he just needed 49 more of these experience points to fill it up. If I got 1 experience point for this small creature, what will happen if I defeat a bigger one? His head turned towards the living armor that had passed him by. It was just slowly lumbering along without a care in the world. Rusty knew that the monsters here were different than him. They wouldn't react even if he got closer and took off their body parts. Perhaps this was the way to get stronger, by slaying these beings that weren't truly alive. He clenched his corroded sword and approached the other armor piece. His corroded frame generated a lot of noise, but this creature didn't seem to mind. It just continued on the path that had been given to it by the voice. Even after Rusty was standing right behind it with his arm raised and sword glowing, it didn't do a thing. However, before the basic power slash could claim its first life, the voice resounded inside Rusty. Stop! Ally! It stopped him in the middle of the downswing and didn't allow Rusty to finish the attack. The authoritative command kept him in check as it referred to the other living armor as an ally, a term loosely known by Rusty who didn't really consider it. The term made him question his desire to gain experience and if it was something worth continuing. However, he couldn't really see these other monsters as true allies but more like prisoners who had to adhere to the voice commands. Do allies force others to do their bidding? As he pondered this, the other living armor continued its patrol, seemingly unfazed by the attempted attack. Rusty couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these creatures and this dungeon than he understood. The voice had labeled them as allies, but he wasn't sure about that. What if the voice considered him an enemy? Wouldn't all these so-called allies destroy him instead? This was something worth pondering, as Rusty was aware of his relative weakness. It would be impossible for him to contend with so many monsters that were driven by the authoritative voice. This left the other fleshy creatures as the best source of those experience points, but they were not something that he could deal with at the moment. Instead, he turned his attention to some other creatures within the dungeon, ones that perhaps could provide him with something. You have gained +1 experience points. 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 Another smaller being fell to his sword as he continued his carnage. As Rusty wandered through the maze-like dungeon, he continued to assault smaller creatures. Smaller spiders, rats, and even slugs on the walls were all fair game. They didn't seem to be part of the control structure of the internal voice, and there were many of them here. It was quite easy to dispatch them as, for some reason, they were slow to react to his advances. With each successful strike, Rusty felt a surge of satisfaction as his experience points increased. The green goop from the defeated creatures splattered on his corroded armor, adding a gruesome touch to his appearance. Despite the macabre scene, Rusty continued his relentless pursuit of experience points, driven by an instinctual desire to become stronger. Thanks to relative ease for dispatching these beings, he had managed to gain the remaining 49 points rather easily. Congratulations, you have gained a level. Congratulations, you have gained a level. Name: Rusty. Classification: Damaged corroded bronze armor F, L2. Type: Magical/inorganic. Hit points HP: 16/16. Magic points MP: 15/15. Special points SP: 6/15. Strength: 11F, +1. Agility: 6F, +0. Dexterity: 7F, +0. Constitution: 11F, +1. Intelligence: 7F, +0. Wisdom: 10F, +0. Willpower: 8F, +1. Durability: F. Rusty was now a level 2 damaged rusty bronze armor and had gained 3 whole attribute points. Considering that all of them had increased by 5 when he gained his title, the increase seemed rather small. His maximum hit points had gone up, and after leveling up, he also noticed that his magic points were restored instantly. However, his special points remained low, and they were regenerating at a very slow pace compared to the magic points. This also reminded him about his previous tests. The time to acquire some new skills had come, so he homed in on another skeletal monster who was holding a sword along with the shield. His helmet made its way onto the creature's cranium and he was presented with a new message yet again. Compatible skills have been found. Please choose a skill that you want to learn. Basic Shield Bash. Active skill: perform a bash with a shield. Even though the message told him that it found multiple compatible skills, he was only presented with one option. There was also another peculiarity: the skill was in a grayish tone this time around, while previously it was a lot brighter. Nevertheless, he focused on the skill just like before and waited for another message just like last time. Insufficient SP to learn this skill, please try again when you have sufficient SP. Not enough SP. Rusty was perplexed by this result as he continued to try to select the skill. The skeletal monster eventually started walking away, and he had to retrieve his helmet. He recalled that after absorbing the skill from the human, his special point counter had gone down to 0. It seemed that he would need to wait quite a bit more before he was able to use this absorption skill again. While he was lacking SP, this didn't deter him from anything. It was possible for him to level up his attributes by defeating small insects and rodents. While this was a slow process, he was not really in a hurry. The resources that he was given would eventually recover, and he would be able to gain some skills with time. So, he started his first leveling drive, and the small creatures that had lived here in peace would soon know fear. Are you sure we should be here? Yeah, don't worry, it's just the first floor. There are only goblins, skeletons, and rusty armors around. They are all trash. I don't know, wouldn't it be better to go to an easier dungeon? The monsters from the lower levels sometimes travel to the upper ones. Ha, that very rarely happens, and if something does, I'll just protect you. An older teenager responded to a girl who was slightly younger than him. Both of them were slowly going down a very long set of stairs leading to a mostly empty chamber. Within it were paths leading to different places, each marked and given a symbol. Oh, I know those. We should probably avoid the goblins, right? The girl pointed at one of the markings and the young man that she was with nodded. That's right, the goblins are weak, but they work in larger groups. It would be hard to deal with just the two of us, but we should be fine if it's just one or two of those green bastards. The young man laughed while puffing out his chest. He was wearing a cheap set of armor along with a sword strapped to his side. The younger girl had some leather armor, and her weapon of choice was a bow that she was already holding in her hand. Even though there was no danger in sight, she seemed worried about this little expedition. As I said, stop worrying. The monsters here are rather weak. How about we just go get some skeletons? Those guys are quite slow. The man pointed to another path on the right side of the chamber. What about the living armors? Those bundles of rust will fall apart from one good kick. Nothing to worry about, they are actually weaker than a skeleton, just take a few more hits, are really slow, and you can hear them coming instantly. If you say so. The girl nodded while the young man continued to grin. He moved in close and placed his hand around her waist, which made her slightly frown. Don't worry, just stick close to me, and there won't be any problems. For a moment, she noticed that he had a strange expression when getting this close. Her instincts were telling her that something was wrong, but due to some circumstances, she needed to get stronger. Leveling up in this dungeon was the fastest way to alleviate her troubles. Even if her companion wasn't the most trustworthy, without him, she would have been unable to come to this place. How about you lead the way, then? Sure thing, just leave it to me. After wiggling out of his grasp, she made the man move in front. He was just a regular fighter type, while she was best at ranged combat. Their combination had an obvious synergy, and she intended to use it to battle the monsters here. Soon, the two disappeared into the corridor and were on their way to adventure. Congratulations, you have gained a level. Name: Rusty. Classification: Damaged corroded bronze armor F, L7. Type: Magical/inorganic. Hit points HP: 20/20. Magic points MP: 17/17. Special points SP: 8/15. Strength: 16F, +1. Agility: 8F, +0. Dexterity: 8F, +0. Constitution: 15F, +1. Intelligence: 8F, +0. Wisdom: 12F, +1. Willpower: 10F, +0. Durability: F. Is there any way to hasten this process? How long have I been doing this? Rusty lowered his head and gave out a sigh as if he was a human. He had spent many days exterminating small critters and bugs around the dungeon and at this point was having an issue finding more of them. Sometimes humans wandered in, but he was lucky enough to avoid them for now. It didn't seem like they wanted to stay in this dungeon too long, or at least not on this floor. One more discovery was a set of stairs going up, which like before he couldn't approach. Rusty was even unable to enter the large empty chamber before the stairs started and could only glance at them from far away. It seemed to be an even more forbidden zone that the voice inside of his heart kept him and the other monsters away from. However, he was able to resist the orders some more, and perhaps his higher levels had something to do with it. If I could only grind something else. Rusty produced a new word that he somehow knew the meaning of. If he continued like this, his levels would only continue to rise at a very slow rate. It was impossible for him to attack the other monsters in the dungeon, which left the humanoid creatures that came from the stairs above as his targets. He had done his best to observe their movements from a safe distance while the other monsters had been destroyed. There was one main reason that he did such a thing, and that was his current level, which he was afraid to lose. The levels of his allies ranged from 1 to 5. He was now the highest level monster wandering this dungeon floor. After observing the deaths of his fellow creatures, he realized something. Every one of them had an assigned level that they always returned to. It didn't seem to decrease, but it also wasn't increasing either. It was possible that if he died now, his level would be reset, and he would again be a level 1 monster. This was something that he wanted to prevent at all costs, as the multiple days of killing critters would go to waste. Resisting the voice wasn't easy, At most, he could slow himself down and wait for the orders to subside. Eventually, as the battle came to a close and there were no other monsters around the fleshy enemies, the call to arms would cease. It was as if without the monster's involvement, the voice inside his head couldn't perceive any enemies. The creatures like him were its eyes, and if he didn't explicitly look at an animate humanoid, it wouldn't trigger the voice's orders. There was one more interesting effect that he also needed to watch out for. If another monster from the dungeon encountered an enemy, they would send out some sort of hidden signal. If he was close by, the voice would also be activated. It was some sort of way to call for reinforcements, but it was easily avoided by him with a small ruse. He just avoided locations that were hot spots for combat. Even if he was ordered to patrol, there was some wiggle room for him, and he used that to prevent any deaths from happening lately. Something that he wanted to pat himself on the back for. Basic Shield Bash. Active skill. Perform a bash with a shield. Basic Power Thrust. Active skill. Perform a powerful thrust attack. Rusty had managed to acquire 2 new skills, one through absorption and the other through regular leveling. When he reached level 5, he was given the basic power thrust. It made him realize that he needed to deliberate more on what skills to get. If they were attainable by regular level UPS, then it was a waste of time to use the absorption skill that had some more drawbacks. One of them he recently discovered. After attaining the basic shield bash skill, the timer had been reset and doubled in length. It was possible that it would become harder and harder to use that skill. Perhaps saving it for something more special would lead to better outcomes. However, he still needed to test it further, and perhaps absorbing something from the humans in the dungeon was a better idea. Those creatures are strange. What is their purpose? They always come from that place and always travel through the same path down. What lies there that they would risk their lives for? Will I be able to see it? His interest was piqued, but he couldn't do much about it. Even now, as he was doing his rounds and passing by the staircase, he tried to head down, but the annoying voice inside of his head kept preventing him from progressing. However, he was not going to give up. Each time he attempted this feat, he was able to get half a step more in. It seemed that maybe, he would eventually be able to head down and unveil the mysteries on the lower floor. Thus he continued on his way while looking out for some smaller creatures. Even though their numbers had decreased, there were still there for him to slay. Even his power/skill had reached the 2nd level, and so did his basic swordsmanship. It was the only way for him to level up, so he made his way towards one of the best grinding spots. Enemy. Gah! To his surprise, he heard a commotion at a part of the dungeon that was usually empty. Rusty had been using it for a while now, and no humans had ever wandered in. There were only large bugs and rats in this side of the dungeon, along with a few of his monster brethren. One of them had just been dispatched by what seemed to be an armored human, similar to the one that had previously defeated him. Should I try it? But there is another one, and I'm alone. After ducking behind the corner and losing sight of them, the voice inside his head quieted down. Just as previously, if he didn't keep looking at the humans, it would not be able to see them. Staying here behind the corner and waiting for them to pass was the best solution, as he didn't think that he could handle them quite yet. His levels and skills were going up, but after getting easily defeated previously, Rusty decided to take a safer approach. This was also a perfect chance to eavesdrop, as his language skills had started to improve and he could now mostly understand what was being said. Are they fighting with each other? Can they do that? Hey, stop that! I told you that I'm not interested. If you're going to be like that, then maybe it would be better if we just return now. The tone that this person was talking exuded an aura of annoyance. Rusty strained to listen, his metallic hearing tuned into the conversation between the two humans. It seemed like a disagreement of some sort, and he was curious about what was happening. The monsters in the dungeon didn't respond much, and he couldn't actually produce a voice himself, so this was quite intriguing. The second voice, deeper and more assertive, responded. Come on, Don't be like that. I was just joking around. No, I think we are done here. The other voice didn't let up and he could hear this maddened person walking in the other direction which led out of the dungeon. The other person remained in the same place for a moment before he finally said something in a now annoyed tone. This damn bitch, who does she think she is? Is she going to report me to the guild? Fuck. It was quite an interesting tidbit. Rusty wasn't sure about the relations of these humanoid creatures, but he could feel animosity and something similar to killing intent coming from this man's voice. He wasn't sure how he was aware of something like this besides the memories he came equipped with giving him the answer. What are they doing? They aren't like us? Isn't there a voice keeping them from attacking each other? Not long after the man voiced his dissatisfaction with the situation, he ran back after the other human person. Rusty was able to hear the two shouting some profanities at each other before a fight broke out. He could clearly hear the two beings clash against each other, something that wasn't possible for him and the monsters in this dungeon. They are fighting. They had moved into one of the dead-end corridors that was not normally patrolled by any monsters. Rusty knew this as it was close to his grinding spot where he spent a lot of time. He slowly approached while trying to minimize the sound of his rusty body. Luckily the two humans were shouting too much to notice anything. When he arrived at the scene he took a little peek so that the voice would not be alerted. There he saw a strange scene playing out. The bigger human had taken out the lower half of his armor and was wrestling around with the smaller one. What they were doing was unknown to him, but it didn't seem like the one on the bottom liked it too much. The fight continued, but eventually, a rock was used to disable the smaller opponent, which gave Rusty an idea. Isn't this a chance? They seem distracted, maybe I should. He knew that he couldn't win against one of those beings in a fair fight, but perhaps they had injured each other enough for him to capitalize on the situation. Nevertheless, Rusty knew that he needed to be cautious. There was no telling what his enemy would do, and there was still some ground to cover before he reached that dead end. His body producing loud noises was a big weakness, but luckily, when he looked behind himself, he spotted something that could aid him in this endeavor. You shouldn't have been such a prude and just let me do it, now look at you. The man panted while tossing a bloody rock to the side. The woman that he tussled with lay passed out before him with a gash to the side of her head. It was too late to go back now, and he did not want to stop either. However, just as he was about to do the deed, a strange clunking sound echoed from behind him. There he witnessed a living armor monster charging his way, a corroded blade in his right hand. This corridor was rather dark and mostly lit at the end. He could barely see the monster by the reflection that its corroded armor was producing. It charged with reckless abandon while scraping its corroded weapon on the walls. The man quickly jumped up to his feet but instantly lost his balance as his pants were around his ankles. He was caught off guard by the monster, but luckily, it was quite sluggish and uncoordinated. A massive swing came his way, but he knew how to handle this situation. Instead of blocking or evading, he jumped forward. His shoulder collided with the chagrin monster, which was toppled to the side. The man didn't go uninjured as his shoulder felt as if it had been hit by a mallet. However, the monster had taken a lot of damage as well, and most importantly, lost its balance. Fucking piece of shit monster, die! The man shouted as he managed to grab the metal gauntlet that was holding the sword and overpower the creature. The two tumbled to the ground and the living armor was slowly losing. Eventually, its corroded blade was used against it as the human adventurer started delivering multiple hits while shouting. The difference in levels and stats was apparent, and the hollowed suit could not survive the beating. Hey! Yet, even though this one had been defeated, it was not alone. Suddenly, darkness took over as the man found himself with something on his head, a corroded helmet quite identical to the monster he had defeated. It was not alone, another one of the living armors had crept behind him and placed his head onto his. What the hell? The man quickly grabbed the helmet in an attempt to throw it off, but to his surprise, he couldn't. For some reason, the corroded helmet was stuck, and quickly after, he felt something similar to a splitting headache taking over. The pain was tremendous, and he felt like a needle was being poked through his eye socket. He panicked and started squirming around. What is this thing? Guh. As his attention was on the helmet, he forgot about the being that it belonged to. He was not alone, and an even sharper pain took over his right thigh. Something had pierced the unprotected part of his body and was quickly yanked out after. He could not see what was happening, and the continuous pain was making it even more difficult. The man started to furiously swing his hands around, but without connecting with anything, he soon felt his other leg being pierced by the same object. His legs gave out, and he found himself down on the ground. At this point, there was far too much blood that he had lost, and the strength that he once had was gone as well. His body, weakened by the continued injuries, finally gave out, and he found himself down on the cold dungeon floor, his last breath soon to be drawn. As he lay there with almost no life left in him, the helmet was removed, and he caught a glimpse of his executioner. A similar-looking armor to many he had easily dispatched in his life. It took the helmet and placed it back onto its chest piece, now covered in his blood along with the corroded blade that had been used as the weapon. It didn't say anything as it raised its blade for a final time to deliver the finishing blow. The blade was brought down with a swift motion, ending the man's life. The dungeon fell into silence once again, with only the distant echoes of the battle lingering in the air. The victorious living armor stood there, its corroded exterior splattered with fresh blood, unmoving and seemingly lifeless. Yet, it was roused again by the groans of another. It turned to face the second adventurer that was still alive, its sword still dripping with blood from the previous encounter and itching for more. Congratulations, you have gained a level. Congratulations, you have gained a level. The first kill title has been acquired. Basic power thrust has leveled up. In the blink of an eye, he had reached level 9 after slaying just one human. The man emitted various strange noises as he was being stabbed, but eventually, it was over. Rusty felt quite pleased with himself, having instantly gained 2 levels by defeating a single enemy. What made it even better was that he didn't suffer any damage, as he used one of his monster friends to absorb the brunt of the attacks. His tactic of placing his helmet on the human while he was distracted had worked. Similar to the previous encounter with another human, this one couldn't remove the helmet. While the man focused on his head and was blinded, Rusty began poking, and eventually, he bled out. There was one mishap during this tactic that he was examining closely. Skill absorption has failed to activate, the host has died before the absorption process could finish. The status he came equipped with had a log window that displayed all the recent system messages. It appeared that killing a person while absorbing their skill was a prohibited action, and he might have been too focused on stabbing the target to notice the issue. It was a finicky skill, and it seemed that he would need to either bind his next target or render them unconscious to some extent before attempting it again. Oh, should I test it on this one? His body turned, emitting a loud screeching sound. There was still another human being in this dead-end corridor with him, and they were still stunned. Rusty approached the woman while holding his helmet under his metallic armpit. Uncertain of what to do, but his status screen pointed towards only one option. Ah, my special points went down because I activated the skill, so I can't do it anymore, I'll need for the cooldown to refresh. He placed the helmet back into its original spot as he realized that he couldn't use the skill again. Before even looking at the new title he gained, his body moved forward. The sensation the leveling up had given him was strange, and he yearned for more of it. His gauntlet clenched tightly onto the corroded sword that was about to break from the previous chaotic stabbing. It aimed true at the groaning woman's neck, but just as he was about to go through with it, something strange happened. There was something inside him that made him stop. It wasn't a voice or any skill from another opponent. It was as if he couldn't bring himself to deliver the finishing blow to this injured woman. Rusty wondered what was wrong, it made no sense to him. This human was just a source of experience points, a means to make him stronger, but for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to plunge his weapon into her neck. Why? Rusty asked himself, but no one answered. The memories within his core seemed to be running wild, presenting him with random tales of enemies being spared, but also different ones where other creatures were shown no mercy. He couldn't really understand why he should give up on this kill here, and soon the turmoil within him subsided. With newfound determination, he gripped his sword again, and this time around, he saw nothing stopping him from claiming this bundle of experience for himself. However, just as he was about to plunge it in, various voices echoed from behind. People were coming and they were close. Oh no! It seemed he had taken too long, and perhaps the humans were guided here by something similar to the voice he had. It was strange that this part of the dungeon, which had remained empty, now had so many visitors. Time was running out, and this was a dead end. Rusty knew that if he started running, his clunky body would give away his position, and he would likely be attacked. The humans were faster and had keen hearing, there wasn't really any place to run. What do I do? I don't want to be slain again. What if I lose all these levels? While his skills didn't seem to be affected by his deaths, he wasn't so sure about his levels, which were abnormal for this dungeon floor. This uncertainty had triggered something akin to a survival instinct in him. Empowered by it, he devised safer battle tactics that aided him in reaching this 9th level. His gaze landed on the shattered body of his monster ally, eventually giving him an idea of navigating through this situation without the need for a direct confrontation. Hey, there is some blood here, it's still fresh. We need to hurry. Don't stop, we might be too late. Did that bastard really go through with it? 3 people emerged at the entrance of the dead-end corridor, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. Leading the way was a tall and muscular woman wielding a large 2-handed sword, with an elvish man and a woman half his height following closely behind. The trio cautiously advanced, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. Hey Silra, stop! What, did you find something? The large woman stopped for a moment while the smaller one called out to her. She pointed to something on the ground before replying. Fresh blood, and monster tracks, we are close, get ready. All 3 nodded before tightening their grip on their weapons. The elven man wielded a bow, while the smaller companion carried double daggers that, at her shorter height, looked like regular longswords. The largest of the 3 took the front as they all moved slowly into the darkened corridor. Soon, they discovered the gruesome scene that had unfolded not long ago. Is he dead? Did he get killed by these low-level monsters? Never mind that, look. It's Layla, she's alive. Blood was everywhere as the corpse of one man lay in the middle. He had multiple stab wounds in his legs and some that had slipped between parts of his armor. It was clear that he was dead, but it also seemed that their friend was alive. The smaller woman from the group quickly moved towards the person named Layla to aid her, while the 2 other people started looking around this dead-end corridor. Did he die to these monsters? Was he already injured beforehand? The elven man asked the large woman while looking at the stab wounds. It was clear that the weapon was a corroded sword that was near the scene. The idiot was probably too busy with something else, but still, damaged corroded armors got him. The large woman pointed out the lack of any protection below his waistline. The 2 were confused by the scene, as the man should have been able to defeat these monsters. They were slow and loud, with a bad sense of balance. With a few pushes, their bodies fell apart, making their metallic bodies more of a weakness than a strength. Hey, you 2 stop babbling and help me. Calm down Maida, how is your friend? She's alive, just a few scratches and nicks here, and also this gash on the head. I think she will pull through. Maida took out a small vial of red liquid and poured it over the head wounds that Layla had suffered. While the effect wasn't instantaneous, the wound started to heal at a rapid pace. After a moment she started regaining her consciousness but was still disoriented. Good, we need to get out of here before more monsters show up. Can she walk? Layla, do you recognize me? Maida? Is that you? What happened? Give us a moment. Maida replied to Silra while trying to help her friend up to her feet. She positioned herself at the exit of the dead-end corridor, ready to face any monsters that might appear. The last member of the party of 3 decided to inspect the gruesome scene that had transpired. Swiftly, he began examining the man's body, removing parts of his upper body armor. He halted after revealing his arm, which bore a peculiar marking. "He has one of them too. Elwyn, did you find something?" "I did, this bastard is one of them, it's a miracle that your friend managed to survive." The man named Elwyn examined the tattoo that depicted a scythe inside of a crescent moon. It was a marking of a certain group that he and the others were aware of. Soon, he shifted his attention to one of the monsters, a living armor. One was close to this man while the other one leaned against the wall with its helmet to the side. It seemed that this dangerous man had been slain by these 2 monsters, which was still quite surprising. He could only assume that he was too busy with debauchery to notice them approach. "One of them? What's going on? He's dead? Did you kill him?" "No, it seemed he succumbed to these 2. Maybe he was tired?" Layla managed to gather herself and finally noticed that the man who had tried to assault her was dead. She couldn't remember much past the point she was hit by the rock. "See that? The moon and the scythe? Yeah. This guy is part of a nasty bunch. They hunt new adventurers for their experience points and equipment, you are lucky that he was an idiot." Maida pointed out the tattoo, identifying the man as part of an infamous group of adventurer hunters. After this encounter, Layla realized that perhaps the monsters were not the most dangerous creatures within this dungeon. It became clear that she couldn't really trust people that she didn't already know, shattering her worldview. "Hey, what are you doing?" Maida looked at her elven friend who had decided to move towards one of the defeated living armors. He slowly picked up a few pieces before going for the helmet that was on the side and was now placing it directly in front of his own face. "This thing feels strange, there is something about it." While the others were talking, Elwyn started examining the crime scene. Judging by the blood splatter, it seemed that it wasn't the armor in the middle that got him but the one by the wall. He moved over to it and picked up the helmet that had a few holes in it. However, before he could examine it further, he heard Silra calling out from the distance, and monstrous growls accompanied her shout. "Hey, we need to get out of here now, there is a pack coming this way." The urgency in Silra's voice sent shivers down their spines, and without wasting a moment, the group hurriedly gathered the injured Layla and started retreating from the dead-end corridor. The echoing growls were getting louder, indicating that the pack of monsters was closing in. As they rushed through the dungeon's passages, Elwyn finally decided to throw the corroded helmet away and instead grabbed his bow. Even though it was peculiar, it was still only a corroded piece of metal that wasn't worth the space it occupied. All of them quickly left the dead end before they could be trapped in it by the charging monstrosities. The group navigated through the dark passages, trying to put as much distance between them and the approaching pack of monsters. Layla, still recovering from her injuries, stumbled occasionally, but Maida and Elwyn supported her, ensuring a swift retreat. Soon, from behind, a group of several skeletons made themselves known. They charged at them as if they had set off some type of trap. There were many, and now that they were spotted, they knew that more of them could appear. Luckily, these creatures were only between levels 1 to 5, not something that this trio would ever worry about. "Are we going to take care of them?" "That depends, how are you feeling, Layla?" "I'm fine, don't worry about me. I can fight too." "Good, let's clear these bastards out then." Silra shouted while charging into the group of skeletons like a mad woman. Her shoulder collided with the first undead creature and sent it flying into the others. Maida and Elwyn followed suit, engaging the skeletons with precision and efficiency. Layla, still recovering, stayed back but assisted them with some well-placed arrows if the moment allowed for it. Despite the overwhelming numbers, the trio fought as a well-coordinated team, exploiting weaknesses in the skeletal structure of their opponents. Silra's powerful swings shattered bones, Maida's swift strikes targeted vital joints, and Elwyn's arrows found their marks with uncanny accuracy. The clattering sound of bones hitting the ground echoed through the dungeon as the skeletons were systematically dismantled. As the last of the skeletal remains fell, the group took a moment to catch their breath. Elwyn grumbled under his nose, which the others noticed. "Is something wrong? These numbers are strange, and how they found us in that secluded corridor was also odd." "Was it?" Silra held her large two-handed sword over her shoulder while making nothing of it, but her elven friend couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The monsters in the dungeon weren't able to pinpoint the location of adventurers unless a certain few conditions were met. Was one of those living armors still alive? It couldn't be. The elven man looked towards the darkened corridor they had just gone through, a foreboding feeling washing over him. "Hey, Elwyn! Snap out of it, we need to go, there might be more on the way now." "You're right. Let us move." While he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off, more monsters could be on the way. They were here to rescue Maida's friend, not investigate the strange activities of the monsters within. There was still some ground to traverse, and his party needed him to detect traps and watch out for ambushes. The monsters weren't the only problem, and there was always the possibility that one of the Crescent Scythe bastards could be there. However, after their departure, something began to move in the darkness. The sounds of corroded metal echoed through the dead-end corridor as the being there could finally relax. The metallic entity that had played dead among the shattered armor of his fallen monster ally, emerged cautiously from the shadows, its head missing. "Did they need to throw my head that far? I can barely see my body, this is quite hard." Rusty would frown if he had a mouth. He had decided to play dead after seeing the group of adventurers approaching, and it seemed to have worked. They had focused most of their attention on the dead man and the woman who had been alive. He wasn't sure what to make of these creatures. One of them had attempted to kill the woman previously, while these three, who were clearly stronger, decided to help her. While this was on his mind now, something more troublesome had happened. His helmet that acted as his eyes had been thrown to the side, further away from his body, that he disassembled slightly to make it seem as if he was dead. Now he was having trouble reassembling himself into one piece again. Despite being able to move his metallic limbs, the visibility was limited, making it challenging to see them clearly. It took a few good minutes until his body appeared in the distance with one arm still missing. "This is annoying, but at least I have survived and my level is still 9. After placing his helmet back onto his shoulders, it magically reconnected with his armor. He then quickly returned to the previous scene of his battle where parts of his armor were scattered around. They weren't in good shape, even though he had not been hit much. The fact that he was moving around so much was straining his body. It seemed that it wasn't designed for this much movement. For a moment, he contemplated if it was possible to use the parts of his fallen brethren, but before he could give that a test run, a strange light appeared on the ground. It was where the adventurer had died and also where the other living armor was lying. The two were starting to bubble up, and the longer this bubbling effect took, the smaller their bodies became. Rusty was fascinated by this strange phenomenon and continued to look as the other living armor disappeared first, its metallic parts being absorbed into the dungeon floor. The man was going through a similar process, but his body was vanishing at a much slower rate. Soon there was nothing left besides the blood that for some reason was left untouched. Neat. Now, what should I do next? Rusty glanced at his status screen and could see that his level was at 9. There was a bar representing the experience he needed to gain for the next level up, and by the looks of it, there wasn't much to go. Even if he still could only defeat smaller dungeon creatures, it wouldn't be long until he achieved level 10, and for some reason, he expected something substantial to occur at that point. He was certain that, for lower-ranked monsters like him, level 10 was the limit. You have gained +1 experience points. Come out wherever you are. I'll make it quick. Splat. You have gained +1 experience points. Splot. You have gained +1 experience points. Stop running away, there is no place to run. You have gained +1 experience points. Another rat fell under the massive metallic boot and joined its brethren in rodent heaven. Rusty was going through a rampage after discovering a small colony of these creatures. They were quite agile beings, making things a bit challenging for the slow-moving living armor. However, eventually, he managed to cut off all the escape routes and trap the small creatures in an enclosed area. Then the slaughter began. The metallic echoes of Rusty's relentless extermination resounded through the dungeon. The small rats were no match for his brute strength and the corroded sword that cleaved through them effortlessly. The experience points kept piling up, bringing him closer to the coveted level 10. I wouldn't need to do this if I got that other human, why did I want to let them live? As he was finishing up his grinding drive, his thoughts went back to a few days ago where he encountered some strange adventurers. He managed to get the first one but had been stopped by a strange invisible force from delivering the final blow. It still didn't make any sense as there was no reason for it, they were there with no way to defend themselves. Was there a reason to not defeat a foe when they were down? He truly didn't know. Congratulations, you have gained a level. You have reached the level limit, please choose a path forward. It has come. But what is this path forward? With the last rat squashed beneath his foot, Rusty stood victorious in the small rat nest. The dungeon floor was littered with the remains of the creatures, and the metallic armor glinted eerily in the dim light. The level up bar on his status screen was now full, and Rusty felt a surge of relief as he was given the level up message. Level 10 was now his, and he was quick to look up his current stats. Name: Rusty. Classification: Damaged corroded bronze armor F, L10 max. Type: Magical/inorganic. Hit points HP: 22/20 seconds. Magic points MP: 18/18. Special points SP: 8/15. Strength: 19F. Agility: 9F. Dexterity: 9F. Constitution: 17F. Intelligence: 9F. Wisdom: 13F. Willpower: 12F. Durability: F. Is that it? His stats went up by a little bit, but he was still quite weak. Rusty expected some drastic change to occur, or perhaps he would get a new weapon. Even having his damaged armor restored would have been something, but he wasn't receiving anything. Thus, after receiving nothing, he decided to go through all of these status windows, and finally, he discovered something new, a new one had appeared. Oh! This must be it. Will it let me become strong? A new window appeared with a strange icon of an egg seemingly transforming into a larger creature that was like some type of quadrupedal monster. He had never seen something like it before, so identifying was impossible. However, without waiting, he quickly tapped this status window, which brought up something called evolutionary paths. Please choose a path. A path. But there is only one. Rusty looked at the singular option in front of him, which looked like a less damaged but still corroded living armor form. It was depicted as a three-dimensional model from the side, and his current form was also in this window. It was to the side, and an arrow was going from it to the less damaged armor. Rusty bronze armor. So I can turn into this rusty bronze armor? I was expecting something grander. The only thing on this screen was his current form and the new one that was almost identical. It was just the same set of armor with fewer dents and holes, but still corroded over. However, considering that his current body was somewhat damaged, this was perhaps the way to get over his injuries. I guess I should press this then. There was a big green button under the rusty bronze armor that had select written over it. The moment Rusty pressed it, a strange glow erupted for a moment with a phenomenon of corrupt text. Some symbols started appearing over the letters that he couldn't read, and for some reason, nothing was happening. Is there something more? This was truly a head-scratcher for the living armor, as he wasn't sure what to do. There was no confirmation to ask him if he wanted to go with this singular option or not after the screen. He continued going after the select button repeatedly and even attempted to do it with both his hands. After focusing on it didn't work. Why doesn't this work? Wait, where am I? Suddenly, he focused his attention elsewhere as the dead rat bodies vanished, and the dimly lit dungeon lost all of its light. As he looked around, he could see a bit of light in the distance, and while stretching his arms to the side, he could feel a hard surface. The open dungeon chamber had switched to a narrow tunnel that he was now going through. He couldn't see anything or hear himself producing any sound, which felt off. At the end, he arrived next to a large door with light seeping in through the cracks. His curiosity got the better of him as he quickly started pushing, and to his surprise, the large doors started to part to reveal something that he had not seen before. A bizarre environment that lacked a ceiling or any dungeon walls, it was a wide open space filled with various things. As he looked up, he could see vast darkness populated by tiny dots of light. It somewhat reminded him of the old void he came from, but it had something within it. However, this space was far from empty, as before him was a giant body of water and a strange structure floating over it. This building hovered over the body of water with one large bridge leading towards it. A giant castle, floating majestically over the expansive body of water, was a breathtaking sight. Its architecture seemed to defy the laws of physics, with towering spires and intricate details that glistened in the ambient light. The castle was crafted from a material that Rusty couldn't quite identify, as it emitted a soft, otherworldly crimson glow, not something that he had ever encountered in the dungeon he came from. The structure was vast, with multiple towers that reached into the sky, disappearing into the darkness above. The exterior was adorned with mysterious symbols that seemed to shift and change as Rusty gazed upon them. It hovered over the water, which looked like a gigantic lake, devoid of any movement or living creatures within it. To the sides were nothing but desolate land that stretched on to infinity. How vast! The living armor, who had been existing for a little bit over a month, was speechless. He could not comprehend what he was seeing and how he got here. A moment ago, he was battling rodents and insects, but now he found himself somewhere truly magical with seemingly only one path going forward. The castle that he was looking at was quite vast, and it stretched all the way into the clouds. There was only one way to get there, and that was through the rocky bridge. However, Rusty was quite an inquisitive suit of armor and decided to first move to the side. He wondered if perhaps there was something to this desolate area around it, or perhaps the water down below held something interesting. To his surprise, he was held back by a seemingly invisible wall, with the only path that he was allowed to take being forward towards the floating castle over the large lake. There was nowhere else to go, thus Rusty moved along the bridge toward the floating castle. The crimson glow from the castle reflected on the still water beneath, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. The sound of his metallic footsteps echoed through the vastness, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Eventually, he arrived before a large castle gate that slowly creaked open without the need for him to push anything. The interior revealed a grand hall adorned with intricate designs and strange symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. The air inside felt charged, and Rusty couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation as he ventured inside. This was a whole new world for him. All the objects were peculiar and nothing he had ever seen before. Instantly he was drawn to the furniture and objects inside, yet nothing was as it seemed. He spotted a strange table with various small items spread out on it. In an attempt to investigate, he grabbed a few, which caused some to drop down to the floor. The material they were made of was smooth yet brittle. When they collided with the hard tiles on the ground, they shattered and the liquid inside spilled out. However, instead of the parts spreading out, they just stopped and almost instantly reverted back to their previous shape. It was as if time was reversed before his metallic eyes, and quickly after he attempted to smash something else, but soon it just restored itself to its previous shape. What is this? Can items restore themselves this easily? Could I restore my body like this? Rusty glanced at his own body, which had been damaged in several areas before. The holes remained, and whenever he moved, his body produced an obscene amount of noise. Yet for some reason, there was no echo in this place and a certain lack of any movement. It was as if nothing was here and it was left abandoned. During his investigation, something eventually caught his metallic eye as a strange light flashed in the distance. That is, after following this light, he ended up at a large set of stairs and probably the only way forward. He wanted to wander around this grand place, but besides the lush rooms filled with strange expensive-looking items, there wasn't really anything that interesting. No weapons or enemies that could give him experience. He wanted to know why he was here, and the large door above the stairs was calling to him. Rusty ascended the grand staircase, each step echoing through the vast hall. As he reached the top, he found himself in front of another set of colossal doors. These doors were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes and symbols that seemed to tell a story he couldn't decipher. Before he knew it, the doors opened automatically as Rusty approached, revealing a room filled with many strange metallic objects, light and heat. It was an awe-inspiring sight, with molten metal flowing like rivers and ethereal flames dancing in the air. The air was thick with the scent of metal and enchantment. Rusty somewhat knew what this place was as the memories given to him identified it as a forge. On the sides, he could see many tools, like various types of hammers, pliers, and chisels. But his focus was on the middle part of this forge where something stood, a direct replica of the rusty bronze armor that he had seen before. It looked exactly like the display inside of his status screen and was clearly what he was supposed to evolve into. Rusty could tell that it wasn't another living armor but an empty shell. Is that my new form? He could somehow tell by instinct that it was the truth, that would be his new body, and perhaps this was something that all monsters that evolved went through. After looking around for a moment, he decided to approach the middle area to take a look at what was probably his new body. At first, he circled around it, but eventually he decided to touch it with his own metallic hand. Instantly, he could feel a connection being formed and something from inside of his current shell being pulled towards the new armored body. This must be it. I'm going to get a new, stronger body. As Rusty felt the connection growing stronger, he could sense a surge of energy coursing through him. It was as if he was being drawn into the new body that was standing in the middle of this fiery forge. He did not know the meaning behind the tools, but he also didn't care. It was obviously better than the damaged one that he was occupying now, so having his essence flow into this one would be what he needed to do. No, stop. Don't just go into it like that, you idiot. Hey! Just as he was about to slip into the new body, he heard a voice calling out to him from a distance. The connection to his new body was severed as he prepared for combat. Rusty was lacking his corroded sword, but there were some metal tools around this forge. However, before he could arm himself, he saw his strange opponent, who was nothing more than just a ball of light. What is that? I'm not a that. It can hear me. I'm not in it, either. To Rusty's surprise, the ball of white light he was talking to could actually hear and understand his words. It was floating in the distance while shouting at him. For some reason it was trying to keep him from merging with the new body that was just standing in the middle of this large forge. Who are you and why shouldn't I? Did you even bother to examine your surroundings? Why would you just ignore everything that is in here? The ball of light approached him, and it wasn't much larger than an egg from a chicken. It started buzzing around his head while shouting and scolding. Rusty could not get his head around what was happening, as this was the first time interacting with another creature. The monsters in the dungeon were more like lifeless husks, and the voice in his head would only give him orders. Hey, what are you doing? Instinctively he reached out to catch the ball of light, but it was quite agile, a lot faster than the rats and with too much space around them to corner. I'm not sure who is the fool, hero. Shut up. If I didn't speak up, then he might have vanished from this place already. Rusty stopped chasing the ball of white light as he heard another voice from the other side. This time around it was a ball of darkish light floating his way. Its voice was a lot deeper, but its demeanor was also a lot more relaxed. The two balls of light started arguing before him, which just made him question their existence more. Even in this form, you fail to learn from these past mistakes. Or did your fragmented form finally start to deteriorate? I'm sure you'd be happy if I vanished, but I'm not going to die before a damn demon. Oh my, is that a challenge? The two seemed to ignore his existence for a moment, which gave Rusty some time to think. His mind was blank, and he had no idea what was happening, but the more he listened to their voices, the more familiar they became. It was as if he knew them from the moment he was born or came to this world. Ah, I think our metallic friend is confused. This isn't surprising, these lowly creatures aren't known to have too much intelligence. The fact that he can form a sentence is already astonishing. Hey! Was that an insult? Oh, how interesting! I wonder if he would understand sarcasm. The black ball of light started chuckling while Rusty felt somewhat annoyed. He was sure that he had been insulted but didn't know how to respond. The two balls of light were quite chatty, but his attention moved back to the new body he wanted. It was possible that these two just wanted to keep him from getting stronger, so while they were chatting, he started to slowly turn back to the corroded bronze armor. Hey, didn't I tell you that it was too early to use that? Do you know that this place, this soul forge can make you even stronger? Can it make me stronger? The white ball of light zoomed between him and the corroded piece of armor. The moment he heard it say that he could get even stronger, it activated a deep-rooted desire. Rusty was tired of hiding from the humans in the dungeon and also tired of getting ordered around by the voice inside his head. If it was possible to use this place to gain even more strength, then perhaps he should listen to what these two had to say. The Soul Forge, had I known you possessed a blessing like this, hero, I would have struck you down much sooner. That's the price you pay for being an overconfident oaf, Demon King. Despite such a gift, you still ended up getting backstabbed by your close aides. That's quite an accomplishment for someone with so many talents. Quite an accomplishment in itself, don't you think? Really? I recall a certain demon army inexplicably retreating, allowing me to stroll right into your grand demonic castle. Perhaps if you treated your aides as individuals rather than cattle, they might have supported you. Nonsense, they were born to serve me, and their purpose was to follow my orders without question. Loyalty is a weakness, hero, one that I have eradicated from my ranks. How loyal were those people you trusted, hero? Rusty listened to the back and forth between the two orbs of light. It seemed that this place was called the Soul Forge, and it was supposed to make him stronger. However, before he received an explanation, the two beings of light started arguing with each other, as if harboring some unresolved resentment. What is loyalty? During their conversation, Rusty finally decided to interrupt. The two orbs of light turned their attention back to him, and the white one sighed as if dealing with an ignorant child. Loyalty is when someone is devoted and true to another, usually out of a sense of duty or love. It's a concept that you probably never had the chance to experience in your dungeon full of mindless monsters. Sense of duty? Love. Instead of answers, he was given more words that he didn't understand, and to make things worse, the two beings of light didn't seem to agree with each other. The dark sphere was quick to interrupt and say that the white one was wrong, and the two started to argue with each other once more. Ignore my ignorant friend here, loyalty is a weakness, a chain that binds you and limits your potential. Limit my potential. Indeed, and you seem to be someone that wants to be strong, don't you want to be strong? I do. Good, then accept me as your master and I shall bestow upon you immeasurable power. Don't believe this idiot demon, he doesn't even know how this place works. Rusty found himself uncertain about what to do, the two glowing lights weren't making any sense. They used words that he didn't fully grasp. One thing was clear, they were more akin to the humans he encountered inside the dungeon than the silent, less intelligent monsters. While he didn't trust them, there seemed to be something that they knew about this soul forge that was supposed to make him stronger. I don't care about those words, just tell me more about this soul forge. Can it really make me stronger? The two orbs ceased their bickering just as the Dark One responded. Well, hero, this is your gift. I'm genuinely intrigued. How does this soul forge work? It appears that it, along with my demon castle, has become one with our hollow friend here. Probably a result of the merger after our untimely demise. It's not exactly the same. I used it to refine my enchanted equipment by gathering rare materials and refining them, but this one... considering that the only thing of note is that heap of junk in the middle, do you mean that this place can somehow refine and improve on our friend's metallic body? Hey, I have a name, it's Rusty. Oh, my apologies, what a magnificent name, Rusty. Rolls right off the tongue. The dark orb chuckled in a way that Rusty, for some reason, didn't appreciate. Unaware of concepts like sarcasm, he decided to let it pass. How do I improve my body? If it works the same as before, you'll have to gather the proper materials and learn the skills required for metallurgy and ore refining. Now that's a good one, a living armor becoming a blacksmith and forging its own body. Rusty, despite not fully understanding the implications of becoming a blacksmith for his own body, felt like he understood the gist of it. They were telling him that he could use the tools here to somehow enhance his own body, the only question was how. While the tools were there, he didn't see any raw resources like ores or ingots. There wasn't really anything to work with, so he turned to the white ball of light that seemed to know this place more. Where and how do I gather proper materials? How do I learn skills for this metallurgy? He waited for the answer while the white ball of light gathered his thoughts. This was it, he would finally be given the answer that he was waiting for his whole existence. I don't know, and I don't quite remember. Haha. The black ball of light started laughing, and it sounded quite menacing with that deep voice of his. Rusty was baffled by the response, not understanding how the white ball of light could do this to him. The answer was right there, but he was being denied, and he was starting to feel something strange coming out. Hey? You don't remember? Did you lie to me? Why would I? As the ball of light was trying to answer, the whole chamber started shaking as Rusty's voice became packed with more anger. What is happening? The two orbs started flickering along with the soul forge and the whole castle. It was as if this whole place was reacting to the rise of Rusty's emotions, not something that the late hero and demon lord thought he had. Calm down, I just don't remember. My memories, parts of them are missing, I really don't quite recall how this place worked. Rusty, my friend, calm your nerves. The hero might be a fool, but at least he is no liar. The two observed the angered armor as the tremors subsided. Their forms, once trembling, started to recover along with the glow. Rusty, devoid of any readable expression, gazed at the two orbs, as if anticipating an answer. It seems that our fragmented existence lacks some of our previous experiences and memories. Fragmented existence. Yes, the two of us had perished. It seems you have somehow absorbed our essences that were recreated in this place. Oh, it must have happened that time. Rusty vaguely recalled his time within the void with other amoeba-like existences. Back then, he had absorbed something radiating the same light as these two orbs. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The Soul Forge, it seemed, was a place that could enhance and refine his body, and Rusty acquired this ability by consuming these two beings with the peculiar identities of hero and demon king. So, you're saying that I have the power of a hero and a demon lord within me? Not quite, we are nothing more than shells of our former selves, but if you desire strength, then maybe there is something we can do. The black orb, more talkative than the white one, floated over to what was supposed to become Rusty's body. It circled it as if examining it before stopping. Soon after, the black orb started glowing, and to Rusty's surprise, the corroded armor began changing color. From a bronze with many rusted parts, it transformed into pitch black. That I would be reduced to this. The Demon King orb gave out a sigh after performing the strange phenomenon. His size had diminished, and so did his light after he made the armor turn into a darker hue. What did you do? The white orb floated towards the now darkened armor and started to examine it as well. I just infused some of my essence into the metal, it should be a tad better now. What do you think, Rusty, my friend? Helpful, aren't I? Intrigued by the change to his new form, Rusty approached and sensed that it had become stronger than before. He was drawn to it, wanting to exchange his damaged, corroded body for this enhanced version. However, before he could, the orb of white light voiced his concern. Stop! Is there still something wrong? Rusty asked, somewhat annoyed with the back and forth between the orbs. Do you really think that I don't know what you are trying to do, Demon King? Whatever do you mean, hero? The black orb replied in a mocking tone, while the so-called hero orb approached the darkened armor. Soon, it began to change colors again, growing brighter as the white orb infused it with its essence. Eventually, the color returned to a more bronze hue with a subtle intensified sheen. There, that should balance things out. Quite the busybody, hero. The two orbs resumed their disagreement, but Rusty wasn't paying much attention. Instead, he focused on observing his newly transformed body, now infused with a blend of both of their essences. Though the corrosion remained, something had improved, and he was confident that this armor was better than the previous one. Finally, Rusty decided to proceed with the transformation. The Soul Forge didn't appear to have anything else in store, and the white orb didn't completely recall how it operated. There weren't any more rooms to visit and he just couldn't wait to finally ascend to a new form. Thus he immediately attempted to touch it even when the black orb voiced his concern. How impatient! He could feel his essence flowing into the stronger body while his old form crumbled to the ground. The transformation revealed his previous form, the dark silvery divine demon nucleus. It flew away from the old, damaged armor and slowly entered the new one, and the transformation was finally taking place. I'll give you one more piece of advice, Rusty. You might not want to use that absorption skill too much. While having many skills is a plus, you don't want to become a jack of all trades, master of none. It takes time to train thyself in many skills, so it would be better if... I think he can't hear you anymore. What a shame, I still wanted to inform the silly monster about the dungeon heart. Let us hope that he doesn't do anything stupid, destroying it wouldn't be the smartest idea. As the Demon King was trying to lecture Rusty about the ways of using skills, the hero interrupted. The armor in the middle of the Soul Forge had begun to fade soon after the nucleus made its way into it. At least now we know that he can't remain here after entering the new armor. But both of us are still here. Quite the predicament we found ourselves in. The Demon King and hero exchanged glances for a moment. Both fell silent, realizing that their existence hinged on the strange monster they now inhabited. Though mere fragments of their former selves, they retained a wealth of memories and emotions from their previous lives. Still driven by desire, they recognized the potential of this living armor and pondered if steering it in the right direction could fulfill their lingering ambitions. I don't know what you are planning, but I won't let you do it. Whatever do you mean, hero? You know what I mean, don't even try to hide it. Ha, not like you are any different. I can feel the anger seething out of there. You want to have vengeance, and why not use a blade of another to fulfill that desire? The white orb remained silent after the question from the Demon King. Soon it floated away towards the empty castle that was now his new home. This world seemed to exist in another realm or dimension, but it was somehow tied to the living armor who was now in the process of returning to the world of the living. Rusty could sense the merging of the hero and Demon King essences within him, intertwining and shaping his newfound form. As the process was completed, Rusty found himself standing tall in his new form. The once damaged armor now felt stronger and more resilient. His senses were heightened, and he could feel the power coursing through his metallic body. Congratulations on achieving a new path. I have evolved. Once his vision returned, the familiar floor with the dead rodents was once again waiting for him. It was clear that he had returned to the dungeon, and he found himself with both fists in the air in a sort of victory pose. He was quick to focus onto his status screen to see what the changes were, and to no surprise, his attributes had gone up by a lot. Name: Rusty. Classification: Corroded Twilight Bronze Armor F plus L1. Type: Magical/Inorganic. Hit points HP: 62-60 seconds. Magic points MP: 44/44. Special points SP: 20/20. Strength: 59F. Agility: 39F. Dexterity: 39F. Constitution: 57F. Intelligence: 39F. Wisdom: 43F. Willpower: 42F. Durability: F+. Oh. All the minuses have vanished, and I've even gained a plus here. The first thing he noticed was that his attributes had increased by a minimum of 30 points, with his constitution and strength being even greater. Although he still had a lot of F letters in his status, there were no minuses, and even a few pluses, indicating that he had become stronger. While moving around, he could feel that his body was more responsive and agile. The once armor filled with many holes was now restored. To make things even more interesting, he could feel a strange energy radiating that could perhaps be attributed to the twilight part of his new classification. This is incredible. I feel stronger, faster, and more alive than ever before. But this might not be all. I should go through everything. Basic Elemental Charge. Active Skill. Allows the user to imbue objects with elemental mana. Outcome will differ depending on the type of the object. His previous skills like Basic Power Thrust or Slash didn't see any changes, but there was one new skill that he had acquired from his evolution. After reading the explanation, he had an idea of what it did, so he was quick to give it a try. However, there was also another skill that sounded similar to the skill Absorption one, this one focusing on materials, which he didn't truly understand. Material Absorption. Active Skill. Allows the user to absorb compatible materials from various objects. As he went through it, he recalled what the White Sphere of Light had said about the Soul Forge. He was supposed to be able to upgrade his body there, but there were no enhancement materials to work with. Perhaps this skill would allow him to gain such materials, or perhaps it would directly augment his body. This concluded his exploration of his new status and his visit to the strange Soul Forge. There didn't seem to be a way to return to that location at this moment, and it was probable that he would need to max out his current level to revisit that area. It was time to test out these new skills, and the Elemental Charge one was first. Rusty gripped his sword, which had also changed to fit his current form more. He somewhat knew how to use his new skill, and as he attempted to activate it, he was presented with a question. Basic Elemental Charge has been activated on the corroded bronze sword, please choose an element. Oh! He was presented with two choices, infuse the sword with the light element or the dark element. Without waiting for long, he decided to select the light element first and watched as the sword started glowing brightly. The light was more intense than any of the torches there, illuminating the area nicely. Is the light the only thing that it does? While he found this effect to be intriguing, he wasn't sure if it would give him an advantage during combat. It would obviously give away his position to anyone in the vicinity, but perhaps there were some uses for it that he didn't fully understand. After noting that his mana had dwindled by exactly 20 points, he activated the element of darkness. This time around, the blade was surrounded by a strange black haze. Is this good or not? It takes a lot more mana than the power slash and thrust, so it should be good. Rusty asked himself the question while holding the darkened blade. The effect lasted for about a minute before the black smudge disappeared from his blade. He wasn't sure, but perhaps after hitting someone with this darkened blade, it would have some kind of added effect to the strike. However, before he could truly grasp these new skills, there was more work to be done, and perhaps with his heightened stats, he would finally be able to challenge some of the humans and emerge victorious. Maybe those guys, but there are so many of them. I should probably wait for a chance to present itself like last time. Why do they always wander around in large groups? How am I going to get stronger in an environment like this? Rusty continued to talk to himself with an annoyed tone while hiding behind a large pillar. His ability to resist the voice had increased, and he could now even look at the adventurers without being pushed into a frenzy, as long as he distanced himself. Since leaving the Soul Forge, there was no one to talk to, so Rusty developed an even bigger habit of talking to himself. After evolving from a damaged, rusted-over suit of armor to a slightly less rusted-over armor, he was searching for a way that would allow him to evolve even further. However, his plan to ambush another lone adventurer wasn't working, as they always roamed around in larger groups. Even though his stats had increased significantly, and he had gained some new skills, Rusty still felt apprehensive about attacking a large group of adventurers. They always seemed too powerful, and the assistance he received wasn't sufficient. Now that he was stronger and faster, he realized how slow the other living armors really were. The same could be said for any other monster there. He wanted to use them as a distraction, but they kept getting defeated before he could even sneak up to deliver a slash. Haven't seen any of the groups fighting like the two last time. Does that not happen often? Rusty noticed that after the incident with the two adventurers, the groups were more on alert than before. It was as if they reacted to the event and increased their numbers to avoid more trouble. Should I just go hunt some rodents? But another thing Rusty noticed was his experience bar. It began to rise much slower than before. He only needed to kill a few dozen rats, bugs, or large slugs to go from 1 to 2 before. Now, on the other hand, it seemed like the requirement was 10 times as high. Things weren't looking too good for him. At this pace, it would take him a month or longer to gain even one more level. I ended up here, if only I could go down. While scouting the environment to ambush a lone adventurer, Rusty followed a group of 5 towards the stairs leading to a lower level. Normally, he wouldn't be able to approach these stairs as the voice inside his head would start complaining, but now it was different. Even after reaching the stairs, there was nothing preventing him from going down. It seemed that his new evolution allowed him to descend to a new part of the dungeon. Rusty wanted to do nothing more than to test his new body and skills, but this new discovery changed his plans. The only thing stronger than his drive for more power and levels was his curiosity. He was already looking forward to seeing new scenery and monsters on the lower floor. With caution, he descended the long flight of stairs, ensuring that he wouldn't make too much noise. His body had changed and didn't produce as much sound, but it wasn't fully silent either. Luckily, it seemed that the group of adventurers he had previously followed had moved on to another location. After 5 minutes of walking, when he arrived on the floor below, there was no one there. As Rusty reached the bottom of the staircase, he found himself in a dimly lit corridor that stretched out in both directions. The air felt different, and he could sense a faint, eerie energy in the surroundings. Excitement and anticipation welled up within him as he ventured further into the unknown depths of the dungeon. The corridor twisted and turned, occasionally branching off into smaller passages. At first glance this lower floor seemed more compacted. Having more tightly knit corridors wasn't necessarily good or bad. The sole advantage against adventurers in this dungeon was the abundance of monsters. With a sufficient number of them, it was possible to overwhelm even a larger party. Surrounding them in a corridor like this could be achieved, but it also restricted the area for attacks. There simply wasn't enough space to approach the enemy from all directions. Though there weren't many pillars for concealment, slipping into one of the numerous side corridors was an option for waiting. However, if a group entered after him, there would be no means of escape. Rusty wasn't quite sure if he could outrun an adventurer even with his raised stats. His body wasn't quite designed for running, but he did have an advantage over the fleshy beings. He never tired. However, his body did become slower whenever his magic points reached 0, something that he learned to watch out for. As he continued with his traversal of this new space, he noticed a commotion. There were people shouting and monsters growling in the distance. With a steady pace he continued through the corridor and peeked into the area that the sounds were coming from to finally discover a larger chamber. There was a party of 5 humanoid beings fighting against a monster type that he had never seen before. Curious as always, he was quick to use his identification skill on one of these new creatures. Classification: Zombie L3. Type: Undead. His skill had leveled up since through the time in the dungeon, and he was now able to identify monster types as well as their levels. The sight of the undead creatures attacking the adventurers intrigued Rusty. The zombies were slow and clumsy, but they seemed relentless, pushing the adventurers back with sheer numbers. Zombies. Undead. Interesting. I wonder what's the true meaning behind a monster type? Rusty observed, pondering the truth behind monster types and classifications. There likely existed a significance to the identification, but he couldn't quite grasp it. The adventurers had a system similar to classification, but it differed. When he glanced at one of them wielding a sword and shield, he could discern some information. There was no type but only a classification, as if the other one was hidden or didn't matter as much. Classification: Fighter L7. Despite the relatively small level difference, it was evident from their movements that the adventurers were stronger. After undergoing his first evolution, Rusty had come to realize that levels could be deceptive. Even though he was merely a level 1 monster, he was far stronger now than when he was a damaged rusty bronze armor variant. Attack! The voice inside his head gave him an order which he managed to resist. He was now able to observe without losing himself at all. At first, it looked like the adventurers were struggling, and the zombies were pushing them into a corner. Then in a strange flash of light, a large chunk of them tumbled down to the ground. What was that? The bright attack triggered a recollection of his new skill, which allowed him to infuse his sword with a radiant light. It came from the adventurer who was in the middle of the group. It seemed that they were protecting him while the man was holding up a strange-looking necklace. It was composed of many beads and ended in a cross shape. This item looked to be the source of the light that was destroying the zombies in this chamber. Classification: Cleric L8. Oh, that's a new one. Would that be the 4th type? Rusty examined the man in the center, effortlessly dispatching the undead creatures. This marked the first occasion he could identify this particular type of adventurer. The previous encounters had involved fighters, scouts, and thieves. He donned a loosely fitting robe, one that likely provided minimal protection, presenting a stark contrast to everyone else who, at the very least, wore leather armor. It was evident that each class fulfilled a distinct role. The fighters stood out as the physically strongest among them, typically clad in heavier armor. The scouts maneuvered with more agility, armed with a ranged weapon capable of launching pointed projectiles from a distance. Meanwhile, the thieves resembled the fighters but wielded shorter weapons such as daggers or short swords, and they were the most agile of the bunch. Initially, he pondered joining the battle due to the considerable number of those fleshy beings. Despite their initial sluggishness, they persisted in advancing even after being struck by weapons. Even losing limbs didn't impede their progress, gradually cornering the adventurers. However, everything changed when the cleric intervened, managing to dispatch these formidable monsters with a burst of light. The cleric's radiant power proved effective against the undead, but Rusty discerned an anomaly. The individual executing this feat appeared fatigued, and the bursts of light occurred at irregular intervals. It seemed as though this magical ability wasn't something he could fully manage. There might be a limit to its uses, akin to Rusty's constraints with magic points. This vulnerability was something that he could potentially exploit. What would happen if that light couldn't be produced? Would the zombies overrun them? Gradually, a plan took shape in his metallic head. If he could somehow disable the cleric, his allies might take care of the rest. The only hurdle was getting close enough to land a hit. The radiant light posed its own threat, as he wasn't certain if it would affect him like it did the undead creatures. It appeared there was no way to close the gap without putting himself in danger, especially if he engaged in close-range melee. They didn't have those on the floor above. Could I use it? Classification: Skeletal Scout L4. Type: Undead. His helmet swiveled to focus on another undead, this one wielding a bow. Strapped to its back was a quiver holding a handful of arrows that it shot in the direction of the adventurers. They defended themselves with shields, and the scouts retaliated with their own shots. It was apparent that the skeletal scout lacked power, but its arrows were reaching their targets. Rusty lacked a bow, and he wasn't versed in archery. However, this presented no issue, as his absorption skill allowed him to acquire the skills of the skeletal monsters if he desired. With his increasing level, there was a possibility of executing proficient ranged attacks, a capability currently absent in him and the other living armors. That should be all. Let's get the materials and get out of here before they revive. While he was devising his new scheme, the battle reached its conclusion. All the zombies and skeletons in the area were defeated, and the adventurers emerged victorious. Though they had not suffered any casualties, they appeared visibly fatigued. Rusty took note that they probably wouldn't be able to handle another wave of monsters as effortlessly, something that could benefit his newest plan. Keeping this in mind, he withdrew momentarily. If he lingered, there was a chance that more random monsters could arrive. For the time being, he simply wished for the adventurers to depart, allowing him to inspect the large chamber with peculiar slabs of rocks protruding from the ground. Fortunately, the group only took another 10 minutes to conclude their activities before retreating back into the corridor leading them back to the first floor. Rusty, who had concealed himself in a separate tunnel, re-emerged and cautiously returned to the scene of the battle, where numerous monster parts lay scattered. He observed that the radiant light had the ability to reduce the skeletal monster bodies to dust and transform the zombies into larger piles, some with charred remnants remaining. That's a powerful ability. Will it destroy my body too? Should I try to learn it? The overpowering nature of the radiant light was evident, capable of annihilating multiple monsters simultaneously without direct engagement. Considering his absorption skill, there was a possibility for him to learn it. However, for that to occur, he needed to keep the cleric alive. Rusty lacked confidence in facing the entire group alone, and the other monsters wouldn't wait for him to acquire the skill for himself either. With the adventurers gone and the area appearing clear, Rusty cautiously approached the remains of the fallen monsters. His metallic fingers sifted through the debris, as if searching for something specific. Luck was on his side as he spotted a damaged weapon, likely belonging to one of the adventurers. A broken spear was embedded in the remains of a zombie, its metallic tip deeply lodged in the flesh. Unlike the other monsters turned to dust, it seemed the adventurers deemed it unnecessary to remove this broken piece of weaponry, or it was a remnant of another battle. Compatible materials found. Would you like to refine this weapon into base materials? Before arriving here, he had managed to decipher the material absorption skill on the upper level. It was a straightforward process, he just needed to find something containing metal, and the skill would activate. Parts of monsters, like other living armor, also worked, but only after they were slain by adventurers. This presented a challenge in refining their parts, as the monster remains would eventually vanish without leaving anything that he could gather. Material 1. Bronze 10%. Material 2 unavailable. Iron 5%. One limiting factor existed for this skill: there were certain material types he couldn't refine from weapons. He was restricted to only absorbing bronze, copper, and tin. Once he selected the desired material, the process would commence. The broken piece of weaponry would start to glow and vanish before his metallic eyes. Though uncertain about the specifics, a graphical representation of this process appeared in his status window. The section was labeled the Stash tab, and it was subdivided into many smaller squares. Currently, most of these squares were empty, except for 3 containing drawings of ingots. One represented the copper he had absorbed, the second one tin, and the last one bronze. Once he gathered 100% of any given metal, it would transform into an ingot and be recorded here. Though currently unable to do anything with them, he anticipated that when he returned to the Soul Forge, something would be triggered. It also used SP as its main resource without having a long cooldown period as the skill absorption skill. At a slow pace, he continued to harvest any bronze and copper he could find. The strange slabs of rocks that were sticking out of the ground he identified as tombstones. It seemed that this place was some type of burial ground, and the zombies that had been defeated started to slowly emerge back within the ground. It was as if they were moving traps that would spring out the moment someone approached from below. You have gained +1 experience points. While navigating the area, he stumbled upon a new discovery. In one corner of this place, there was a nesting ground for strange worm-like creatures. Upon seeing them, he decided to experiment and gained a point of experience after stepping on one. The encounter didn't end there. Shortly after squashing the bug, a peculiar purple mist shot up from its compressed body. You resisted the poison. Poison. Being a being of living metal, Rusty lacked internal organs that could be affected by the poisonous mist. He grasped the concept that poison could have adverse effects on living beings, but it held no threat for him. After a brief moment of contemplation, he picked up one of the worms from the ground. It wriggled around, attempting to bite into his metallic body. After gripping it firmly, he gained another experience point and triggered the release of the poisonous mist. Those people did stay away from this side of the chamber. Were they afraid of these things? His mind brimmed with new ideas on how to leverage these small creatures to his advantage. Soon, the rattling of bones caught his attention, signaling the reformation of a skeletal scout alongside the zombies. When he examined the quiver with arrows it held, along with the bow, a brilliant plan for his next hunt began to take shape. Perhaps, in the near future, he could accumulate substantial amounts of experience. However, before that, he needed to thoroughly explore the entire second floor to uncover any additional surprises that might aid his quest for strength. Come here, you undead bastards! We don't have all day. Come here! Shouts of people filled a gloomy underground crypt. Many tombstones with strange markings started releasing foul-smelling fumes as bodies of undead creatures burst forth from the ground underneath. Tens of them emerged instantly, looking in the direction of where the shouting was coming from. The moment they spotted the few humans there, they started charging instantly. In the dim light of flickering torches, a group of determined individuals stood their ground, weapons drawn. Even though many undead monsters like skeletons and zombies were approaching them, they didn't seem too bothered. Everything was going according to their plan as some ran around strategically to force the monsters into a more tightly knit group. Soon many zombies were bumping into each other while charging after one of the adventurers. That's it, herd them together. We can't waste too many spells on these trash mobs. Get ready, Edmund. Radiant light, source of grace so pure, I stand against darkness, my prayers will endure. Turn undead away, banish the night, in thy name, restore the sacred light. In one corner of the undead crypt, a man stood, his rosary wrapped around his hands as he continued to pray to his gods. Under him a layer of radiant light was beginning to form, and the more he continued to say his prayer, the more of it appeared around his body. All the monsters that had been herded together were heading in the direction of this man named Edmund, something the people in here had planned all along. The group of adventurers had 6 members. 4 of them had shields and heavier armor to protect the praying man, while one of them, who was more nimble, lured in the monsters. It was a surefire plan that this group had carried out a few times before, and their goal was to move into the deeper areas of this dungeon once their levels had increased. Even though a single zombie or skeleton didn't offer much, with the help of divine magic, they could easily dispatch large groups of them instantly. That should be enough, now hold. On purpose, the group placed themselves with their backs to a wall. The zombies and skeletons could only come from one direction, which allowed them to lure in many more. The four fighters with the large shields pushed back against the undead creatures and waited for their cleric to finish the chant. Just like every time, once the spell erupted, these monsters would turn to nothing more than dust in the wind. Grant me strength in this holy endeavor, banish the shadows, let them fade forever. Turn Undia. However, their half-heartedly created plan didn't account for everything. At the moment the priest was about to finish casting the Turn Undead spell, something out of the ordinary happened. From an unknown direction, something flew in an arch and connected with the ground close to the cleric. Once looking at this projectile, they identified it as an arrow with a strange worm creature squiggling around as if it had been freshly impaled by it. As it wiggled around, a purple gas erupted from it, and it quickly started spreading through the whole area. To make things worse, it wasn't the only one there. Soon others started falling down in the general direction of this party that had led itself into a dead end on its own accord. It was not something that they expected to ever happen, as the monsters here were not intelligent enough for such tactics, nor did they detect any other adventurers who could have planned an ambush. Shit, it's poison mist. How did a crypt leech get over here? The adventurers' coordinated strategy fell apart as the unexpected poison mist engulfed the area. Panic set in among the group as they realized the dire situation they found themselves in. The cleric, Edmund, struggled to complete his incantation amidst the chaos. The mist, originating from the punctured crypt leeches, started affecting the adventurers, slowly weakening them. Edmund, quickly cast the cleansing spell. No, we need to get rid of the zombies first, cast Turn Undead first. What are you doing? The cleric, Edmund, was struggling with the poisonous mist and the interrupted Turn Undead spell. He could not focus on chanting due to the poison and inability to do it while coughing so loudly. Even one of those worms could produce a large explosion of this mist, and something from afar continued to shoot arrows in their direction. Even when the adventurers used their shields to bat them away, the pierced leeches continued to burst and produce more mist. To make things worse, they had attracted a large group of undead monsters that continued to push. Shit, this never happened before. This was supposed to be a safe zone for leveling. Did the guild lie to us? Stop talking, we need to get out of here. It was clear that their plan would not work. The cloud of poison was surrounding them, and the longer they stayed inside of it, the harder it would be to leave. They were all under the poison status now, and even their cleric was suffering and unable to cleanse himself. Soon they all charged out together and made a run for it. Even though it was hard to break and move, they needed to do it to survive. Come on, we need to get to the corridor, it isn't far from here. Luckily, there was an escape route nearby, a narrow tunnel not too far from here. They knew that if they were able to make it there, then even the zombies wouldn't be able to follow after. Soon they made a break for it. Everyone was coughing, and their skin was turning purple. They were losing stamina and health points at a rapid pace, but as long as they made it to the safe location, then their cleric could cleanse all of them. To their surprise, when they reached the tunnel that should lead them to a safe location, it was not the salvation that they expected, as an unknown person was waiting for them. At least that's what they looked at first, but soon the adventurer party realized that it was not a human but a monster that shouldn't be in this area. A living armor? What is it doing here? The team leader asked while charging forward, but before he could push the monster out of the way, a massive burst of poisonous mist erupted from the ground. To his surprise, the ground was littered with the small bugs, and the monster seemed to be purposely stepping on them while retreating into the tight corridor where even more poison awaited them. Considering this turn of events, running towards that location would become impossible, and they would quickly succumb to the poison. Eventually, the group of adventurers ran out of options. The monsters were unaffected by the poison in the air while they continued to suffer. Their bodies became sluggish, and some of them were finally caught by the horde they had enticed. The numbers were not something that they could contend with, and soon their loud screams filled this underground crypt. Rusty observed the demise of the adventurer party with a mix of curiosity and detachment. The poison mist had done its job, rendering them vulnerable to the relentless attacks of the undead monsters. The living armor, hidden in the poisonous corridor, watched as the adventurers fought desperately for their lives. He noted how their once coordinated group crumbled the moment he introduced something that they weren't expecting. This was his test run for his new strategy. After previously discovering the hidden poisonous bugs, he decided to use them. On his back, he was wearing a quiver that had been emptied out a few moments ago. Right after the adventurers gathered the zombies, he set his plan in motion and started firing. Once the worms were pierced, there was some time to fire them before the toxic fumes erupted. The result was quite favorable, so he soon moved to the second stage of the plan. Before he attempted this, he took a whole week to examine his enemies and gather archery-related skills that had helped him in this new endeavor. Basic Power Shot. Active Skill. Perform a more powerful ranged attack. Basic Archery. Passive Skills. A skill that makes it easier to wield a bow, is required to unlock more powerful archery skills. With their help, he was able to somewhat aim his shots in the direction he wanted. The adventurers were ready to receive arrows that were shot directly at them from the skeletal archers, but they weren't ready for him, who aimed at the blind spots and ground. Rusty quickly realized that strategy was key to getting stronger, as the monsters in this dungeon could be used in various ways to give him a shot at slaying these adventurers. He just needed to cut off their escape route with some of the poisonous bugs that he transported to this closest corridor. Even if they charged in, the poison would do its thing, and now it was time for him to get involved directly. As the remaining adventurers fought desperately against the undead onslaught, Rusty stepped out from his hiding spot. His metallic form clanked softly as he approached the group, which was still under the influence of the poisonous mist. The adventurers, weakened and overwhelmed, weren't even able to react to his sword coming in from the back. Arg! His blade slid between the gaps in one of the man's armor as he drew blood. His opponent was grappling with two zombies and unable to react to the third opponent that emerged from the now thick poisonous fog. As he drew his blade out of the wound, blood started spilling out, and the man soon was overpowered by the other monsters that started to rip his body apart. Rusty's gaze turned to the others, and the one with the cleric class in particular. This was the focal point of his strategy. Without this person, this group was incapable of defeating the undead creatures which they awoke themselves. He knew that if they took their time, they would have been victorious and his plan would not have worked. If they used their blades instead of the strange light, it would have taken longer, but their defeat would not have come. As he drove his blade into the wheezing cleric, he tried to learn, as this was just the beginning of his journey. Congratulations, you have gained a level. His mind was taken elsewhere as he heard the message informing him that he had leveled up. He momentarily stopped himself from attacking some of the remaining adventurers, which was a mistake that he would now remember. After the cleric went down, Rusty found himself flying into some of the other monsters as something collided with him from the side. His body was metal, but it was hollow inside, not something that could take strong blows. In the past, this would have caused him to break into multiple parts, but he was not quite the damaged rusty armor anymore. He was not that weak. After colliding with a skeleton and zombie, he managed to stabilize himself. When looking at his side, he could see a gash in his armor that had been formed by an axe swing. The owner of the axe was the only remaining human who had not yet succumbed to the poisonous mist. I will not die here. The adventurer swung his axe with determination, aiming for Rusty's vulnerable points. Rusty, realizing his mistake, quickly regained his composure and raised his sword to parry the incoming blows. The clash of metal echoed in the corridor as the rusty blade was pushed back and broken from the impact. Luckily, the lingering poison along with the other monsters was still there. Even when the adventurer wished to deliver the final blow, he couldn't. "Gee, get off me, ah!" His neck had been bitten by one of the monsters, and soon more closed in on him. The adventurer began swinging around wildly, attempting to pry the monster off him. His will to survive was commendable, driven by sheer desperation. Before long, Rusty's broken blade made its way into the man's flesh as he pierced it through one of the other monsters, a surprising feat for the one delivering the final strike. So it is possible. Congratulations, you have gained a level. The battle concluded, and the mist began to clear away. The zombies continued to pile on top of the defeated adventurers in a gory display, while Rusty tried to comprehend how he had managed to pierce one of the other dungeon monsters. He soon concluded that it had only occurred by mistake during a confrontation with an enemy adventurer. When he attempted to strike any monster intentionally, he found himself still unable to do so. Name: Rusty. Classification: Corroded Twilight Bronze Armor F+L3. Type: Magical/Inorganic. Hit points HP: 69/69. Magic points MP: 53/53. Special points SP: 20/20. Strength: 67 F++8. Agility: 44 F+5. Dexterity: 45 F+6. Constitution: 64 F+7. Intelligence: 43 F+4. Wisdom: 48 F+5. Willpower: 48 F+6. Durability: F+. He didn't have much time to deliberate on the possibilities as his attention was taken to his status screen. He noticed a few things, one of them being the much higher amount of stats that he was getting from these 2 levels ups than before. Previously he never got more than 1 attribute point in anything, now he was getting multiple points in all of them. There was also one other interesting thing: his strength stat received a plus to the letter F representing it. I think I get it. Rusty soon grasped the purpose of the letters. They served as a simplified means of gauging his power. After the numbers surpassed a specific threshold, the letter would transition. Although uncertain of the precise number, it appeared to be around 66 for the plus sign. Rusty speculated that if he halved this amount, then 33 might be the cutoff point for the minus sign. Could 99 be the limit for the attributes? Does something happen once you get over it? There was no way for him to predict until he reached that point, but before that, he had other problems to address. Despite gaining 2 levels and defeating all the adventurers, his body bore the scars of battle. A massive hole adorned the side of his body from the recent axe hit, and his sword had snapped in the middle. Unsure of how to deal with his broken weapon and the injuries, Rusty faced uncertainty about how to proceed further without weapons and with holes in his body. Is there no way to take care of this? Do I need to not get damaged before getting a new body? This felt somewhat unfair to Rusty, who grew weary of sustaining continuous damage. The adventurers proved to be a formidable foe, and he harbored doubts about defeating them without incurring any harm. Although he could risk death again, he remained uncertain whether he would be restored to the same state he had become. There had to be a way to mend himself, and soon enough, his system came to the rescue. While he stared at the destroyed blade and the hole in his armor, a pop-up screen materialized. Do you wish to use gathered materials to repair the damaged sword? Familiar with how these processes worked, Rusty promptly confirmed. As he did, the stash tab containing all his materials suddenly appeared. Please select the materials that you want to use. In his stash, Rusty found only 3 items: tin, copper, and bronze. To make things easier, the icons representing the ingots were color-coded. The box containing the bronze ingot was green, while tin and copper were orange. Upon selecting the bronze, a peculiar phenomenon occurred on the surface of his broken blade. Gradually, it began to revert, as if time were being reversed, and within a minute, the blade was fully restored. This is it. With a cheer, Rusty held the restored sword high in the air. One of his major problems had just been resolved. Now, he only needed to concentrate on gathering more bronze to mend any future wounds. As long as he had enough, he would be able to restore both his body and weapons. The only downside was that it also used a few of his special points, which would limit the repairs. Ah, No, wait. His attention shifted back to the defeated adventurers, now mauled by the undead monsters. Before he could begin collecting their weapons and armor, the dungeon seemed eager to swallow them whole. The only item he managed to retrieve was the lone battle axe that had caused him an injury. There must be a better way of gathering those materials. While one battle had concluded, this marked only the beginning. Rusty, having tasted victory once more, felt his goal of becoming stronger drawing closer. He envisioned dominating this dark expanse, aspiring to become the strongest monster here and perhaps beyond. Combining tin and copper. Please wait. Bronze ingot has been created. It does work. Was this what the orange color meant? Rusty delved deeper into his newly discovered ability to use bronze ingots from his stash tab. He also had ingots of copper and tin, which he could combine to form the bronze necessary for repairing his body. Only after combining the two metals could he use them, as copper and tin didn't integrate into his body independently. The process was intriguing, albeit costing SP, a resource crucial for many of his best skills. SP management posed a challenge. It took hours for the bar to recharge, and leveling up alone couldn't increase the number. The only potential way to increase this resource was through evolving, and perhaps that was the sole method available. Now what should I do? What do you think? After shifting his attention away from the stash tab, he posed the question to a drooling monster. It was one of the undead, just standing in the crypt where he had dealt with the adventurers. The others behaved strangely for a moment. After the battle concluded, they stopped moving, and eventually, the graves they emerged from began to open. Slowly, some crawled back in, while others, like this one, stayed behind, becoming Rusty's conversational partners. You don't have anything to say, Mr. Zombie? No one ever answers besides those two light balls. I wonder what they are up to. Some time had elapsed since his visit to the Soul Forge, and Rusty began to miss the creatures capable of conversing with him. This particular monster just stood there, with some sort of liquid oozing from its upper orifice. He gave it a few pokes, but the creature eventually departed when one of the graves opened up for it. Not even going to say goodbye. How rude. Fine, I'll get stronger without your help. After shaking his metallic fist in anger, Rusty picked up the large axe that had remained. Fortunately, it didn't vanish like the rest of the adventurer armor that the zombies brutalized. One other piece of equipment that he had managed to wrestle away from his monstrous friends was a sword sheath. After strapping it to his body, he would not have to constantly hold his corroded blade with his hands anymore. It appeared that as long as he didn't leave equipment on the ground for too long, the dungeon would not be able to absorb it. Perhaps it possessed a skill akin to his material absorption, which made sense as he often witnessed some of the holes within this place mending themselves. The voice hasn't been telling me much since I got to this level, I wonder why. Upon descending to the second floor, he noticed something peculiar. The voice didn't instruct him to patrol anything, it was as if he was somewhat free from its grasp. While it still prevented him from attacking other monsters deliberately, if he accidentally struck them, the voice did not intervene. Despite his attempts after the last battle, he found himself unable to perform an attack even from a distance. Should I stay here, or try another location? Rusty had emerged victorious, and his strategy appeared to be yielding results. However, for some reason, he felt an inclination not to linger here. The adventurers seemed to be cooperative beings, forming groups and coming to each other's aid. Though uncertain, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone stronger might arrive to investigate the fate of the defeated group. One of them mentioned something, a guild? I think this guild thing isn't anything good, but I won't let it stop me either. Perhaps he needed to exercise caution, but this wasn't the only spot where he could defeat enemies. Equipped with his quiver and poisonous leeches, he had alternative means to overcome other foes. These were not his only resources. Upon reaching the second level, he extensively explored the area and found other interesting things that could aid him. Thus, armed with the means to defeat the foes that he had previously feared, it was time for him to begin the hunt. He only had access to the first and second floor, but the latter was about twice the size of the one he was initially summoned to. While navigating through it, he encountered several interesting chambers, such as the zombie-filled one. It became evident that this floor contained more concentrated danger zones with fewer monsters traveling between them. There were other places that he could hunt the adventurers, and there was no reason to just wait for another party to arrive at the crypt location. It must be my lucky day. After arriving at the next location, Rusty had to wait for a few minutes until his next target arrived. The place resembled a wide corridor with seemingly nothing interesting. However, upon inspecting the ground, he noticed strange square tiles with various symbols on them. When adventurers entered, they moved in a peculiar pattern over those square tiles, hopping between them. This one will be more difficult, but I can do it. Rusty psyched himself up while preparing his new scheme. This room held a certain secret that could be used to defeat the 4 people passing through it. Once they were around the middle of the long corridor, he decided to make himself known. "Hey, what is that thing doing there? That's not supposed to happen." The place was well lit, and he was waiting at the other end where the party was heading. His metallic body was easily visible, but that didn't matter as he only needed to place himself on a specific tile for his plan to work. As he stepped on it, a clicking sound resonated, and a large slab descended, blocking both the entrance and the exit. In response, the adventurers started shouting, clearly confused by what was happening. The monster set off the trap? Did the guild give us faulty information? The sides. Shit, get ready. The trap has been triggered. One of the individuals pointed to various rocks sliding to the sides, revealing more monsters. A combination of zombies, skeletons, and corroded armor pieces that resembled the old variant to which Rusty used to belong slowly emerged from small pockets within the walls. They quickly turned to face the small group of adventurers. The monsters outnumbered the adventurers 4-1, but this wasn't an immediate death sentence. Rusty was well aware of the strength these adventurers could possess, and without bringing the poisonous worms with him, this plan would likely fail. There is something wrong with that living armor. What is it doing? Basic archery has reached level 3. As in the previous battle, Rusty employed the exact same tactic of introducing poison into this chamber. With both the entrance and exit now closed off, the poisonous mist produced by the little creatures spread rapidly. He fired off a few arrows into the distance to ensure that it covered the entire area, and just like before, the adventurers had no answer to this tactic. They began to cough, and in their weakened state, they became perfect targets for the monster onslaught. With not many arrows remaining in his quiver, but enough to produce the poisonous cloud, the rest of the battle would need to be fought at close range. Rusty had strapped his original sword to his body, but for this occasion, he wielded the sturdier iron axe he had taken from the other party. Charging at the group overwhelmed by the 20 or so monsters, he aimed to join the fray. The cleansing potions. Some of them tried to drink some type of blue-colored liquid but were unable to as they were rushed by the monsters from all directions. Their skin started turning purple and veins bulged out, which gave Rusty all the information that he needed to know. Soon he swung down his axe at one of the people, but to his surprise, he could not use it too well. Something feels off. The weapon was clearly superior to his one-handed sword, but Rusty found swinging it to be jarring. Even when he landed a few hits, they weren't too precise and lacked power. He managed to use his power/skill with it, but something wasn't quite right. It was as if his current body was not suited for handling this weapon. It felt similar to the time when he was still only a damaged corroded bronze armor, and he had an inkling as to why this was the case. Soon, he decided to just throw the axe at one of the adventurers and pulled out his sword from the sheath. Arg! And no, stay away! I can't die here! With the combined powers of the dungeon monsters and the poison, the group of 4 eventually succumbed to the ambush. They fought valiantly and even managed to defeat 10 of the undead monsters, but the more they struggled, the more the poison spread within their bodies. Even after drinking potions, without being able to leave this trapped corridor, it was pointless. Soon the whole corridor was covered in silence and Rusty was rewarded with another level up. Congratulations, you have gained a level. Name: Rusty. Classification: Corroded Twilight Bronze Armor F plus L4. Type: Magical/Inorganic. Hit points HP: 72/70. Magic points MP: 55/55. Special points SP: 20/20. Strength: 70F plus 3. Agility: 46F plus 2. Dexterity: 47F plus 2. Constitution: 67F plus 3. Intelligence: 46F plus 2. Wisdom: 50F plus 2. Willpower: 50F plus 2. Durability: F plus. Hey, stop eating them. The battle was won, and he had suffered a few minor scratches here and there. While it might not be the most honorable way of fighting, using the other monsters as meat shields was proving effective. Previously, he was unable to even harm one of these fleshy humanoids, but now he had successfully defeated 2 whole parties. His level had increased from 1 to 4 in just a span of 1 day, and perhaps there were even more gains to be had. Hey, give me that! After wrestling away a few pieces of armor, he started absorbing the metals inside. To his surprise, the best source of bronze was from the other corroded armor pieces left by the 2 living armors that had been with him. Their pieces were scattered around the corridor and seemed quite compatible with his skill. It appeared that after the monsters were considered dead, they reverted to just armor that he could now use. The loot here was a bit better, but soon it was vanishing like before. Rusty wished to collect more of everything to use later, but there were no areas in the dungeon that wouldn't swallow them up. He discarded the axe he had used and instead decided to grab an iron longsword. It now became clear that without the passive skill for using certain weapon types, he would be unable to use them proficiently. I feel like I should be gaining some skills, but I'm not. After these few confrontations, he was left pondering some of the leftover memories. He was sure that people were able to gain skills through means other than just leveling up. However, he had to use the absorption skill to gain most of his, and the rest were obtained through leveling up. Perhaps after he visited the Soul Forge again, one of the balls of light could give him an answer, but for now, he needed to move towards the 3rd location. This was not the last spot he had discovered that could allow him to grind levels faster. Having used up the poison leeches, which were unnecessary for this location, Rusty now needed to gather more arrows. Soon, a few skeletal scouts were left without a quiver or bow, as the one he had used had also broken down. The repairing skill didn't work on weapons acquired from others but only on his own bronze blade. The rest needed to be replaced by other means. After a long walk, he finally arrived at the last destination, which seemingly looked like a dead end with no place to go but down. He now stood before a deep chasm with no clear bottom. Even when he accidentally kicked some rocks down, there was no echo, as if it were a bottomless pit. Normally, this place wouldn't offer much besides falling down to his doom, but in the distance was his current target, a set of dangling bridges. It was a path leading to a different section of this dungeon level and also the next set of stairs, probably leading to the 3rd floor. During his scouting trip, he noticed that people tended to go through this place to reach the other side. There were only some monsters at both ends, but nothing on the sides. He was sure that no one was expecting him, as he had already confirmed it. They are getting information from this guild but they never accounted for me. The longer he lived in this dungeon, the more he could analyze his main opponents. Initially, these adventurers seemed like powerful foes that he could never hope to defeat, but now things were different. They were ill-equipped and unprepared for an unexpected turn of events, and he was starting to believe that they lacked intelligence as well. Thus, he waited for his prey to appear, and finally, after an hour or so, another group of 4 emerged. They dispatched the monsters that were waiting at the start of one of the bridges. Then, they continued on their way through the seemingly bottomless chasm. The bridge they took was made of wood and vine and would wobble around slightly. Yet, even with this danger, the adventurers didn't seem to mind going through it together. Rusty wasn't sure why they were so convinced that it wouldn't crumble, but he attributed it to the same reason the other two parties fell: lack of intelligence and over-reliance on old information. Soon, he notched one of the arrows into the bow and aimed. He found the perfect spot just so he could easily hit the adventurers who were passing over the bridge. The arrow started glowing as he used the basic power shot skill that he absorbed from the skeletal scouts. After releasing the arrow, it sailed through the air, finding its mark and striking the adventurer in the back. The individual staggered, letting out a cry of surprise. The others turned to look at the screaming man who staggered and fell over the bridge to his doom. Ha! This is too easy. Rusty felt something in his chest as he saw the man plummet to his doom. The continuous victories were slowly increasing his self-confidence that had been previously destroyed after his first two deaths. Quickly, he was realizing that perhaps these opponents weren't as formidable as he previously thought. They were panicking and not really able to do anything, so he continued to unload more arrows without worrying about being hit himself. The tunnel he was in lacked any light, but the area where the bridge was situated was quite well lit. As the adventurers scrambled to face the threat, Rusty continued to fire arrows from his vantage point. The wobbling bridge made it challenging for them to maintain their balance. The element of surprise gave Rusty a significant advantage, and soon, another target was hit, this time wounding another man on the leg. Due to the shaking and screaming, the monsters on the uncleared end were now alerted to the adventurers' presence and started to slowly move in their direction, something that Rusty was counting on. The wounded adventurer struggled to stand, while his companions desperately tried to stabilize him. The monsters, sensing the vulnerability, closed in. Rusty continued his barrage of arrows, targeting the weakened individual. The glowing arrows struck with precision, causing chaos among the group. "Damn it! We need to get off this bridge!" one of the adventurers yelled. "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to die here." Another adventurer did the same, and to Rusty's surprise, the wounded person had been abandoned while the other two ran to save their skins. With the target being more stationary, he decided to focus on the wounded man, as gaining experience was the main point of this strategy. While this allowed the other two to escape to a safe location, the man left behind eventually succumbed to the arrow barrage and also fell down into the dark chasm. "Oh well, 2 out of 4 isn't bad, but I didn't get that much experience out of this one." He couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and disappointment in not being able to defeat the whole group before they ran. Chasing after them was a possibility, but he would probably not be able to find them. The continuous victories had bolstered his confidence, and he craved more. Thus, his hunt continued, and the dungeon had finally become his hunting ground, or at least that's what he thought without realizing what he had set in motion that very day. Soon he would realize that perhaps he shouldn't have underestimated the people called adventurers.